It all starts in Mahidor, on the western side of the continent, 4 years after Cardion became the new emperor of the Eshra Empire. In the middle of the chaos of that great war of conquest, there was a young mercenary who preferred to hide his past from everyone, remembering how his life had completely changed years ago. Back then, the young guy received sudden, shocking news that he needed to get married as soon as possible. The guy was totally clueless and asked what his dad meant by that, but his father just warned him that his partner would be the young lady from the noble house Wibben. His dad explained that she was 16 years old, very pretty, kind, and that her favorite hobby was taking care of gardens. If he didn't want her, he should just hand her over to him. A short time later, the young man opened the door to finally meet his future wife in person. At only 14 years old, he was about to tie the knot forever with a noblewoman he had never seen before in his life. The boy started sweating from nervousness, finding that whole situation way too sudden and hard to believe. He could barely wrap his head around the fact that he was actually about to get hitched in such a rushed way. The young guy couldn't understand his dad's words, let alone the real reasons behind that sudden marriage. He wondered why such a proud noblewoman would accept a proposal like that. After all, it made no sense for her to want to marry someone who came from a simple merchant family like his. When the bride finally showed up and said it was a pleasure to meet him, the guy froze completely in her presence. Looking closely at her, he found out her name was Tyria Wibben and was totally mesmerized by her beauty. Tyria formally introduced herself with all her grace, wearing a beautiful white wedding dress. She had bright blonde hair like wheat fields and soft green eyes that radiated so much gentleness. Her skin was extremely pale, and her cherry red lips immediately caught the boy's attention. To him, Tyria was the very definition of mystery and elegance in the flesh. His dad asked Elric to greet her. Quite embarrassed, the guy bowed and stammered out that it was a pleasure to meet her too. Despite all the confusion in his mind, a single clear thought popped into his head at that moment. Standing at the altar, he decided he would spend the rest of his life by her side from then on, and he realized that strong feeling that came out of nowhere was his first love. Shy about not being able to stop smiling, he tried to hide his blushing face during the ring exchange, to cover up his immense happiness. The young guy even made a silly face to avoid looking goofy in front of her. He just had no idea what consequences that attitude would bring later. The guy didn't realize how much that serious expression ended up hurting his bride deeply. On a very stormy night, the mood inside the mansion felt just as dark as the sky outside. Inside the quiet room, a single lit candle softly illuminated the area. Elric fiddled with his wedding ring, reflecting in silence on that sudden union. The boy was super thrilled thinking that such a refined and elegant woman was now his wife, and he remembered once again when his dad said she was the young lady of House Wibben. He was really living his best life. However, as he paused to think things through, he realized there was something very strange about this whole story. Sitting on the bed, he questioned his maid about why a noble like Tyria would agree to marry the son of simple merchants. The maid named Rhonda seemed quite hesitant and tried to dodge the subject. Elric pressed her and asked Rhonda to spill the truth already, since he knew she was in on all the family secrets. Seeing the young master's determination, she hesitated for one more moment before finally giving in. Rhonda revealed that, in reality, the whole thing was nothing more than an arranged marriage out of pure financial interest. She explained that House Wibben used to be very rich, but went broke and was drowning in debt they couldn't pay back no matter what. Because of that, Elric's family offered the money needed to clear their debts in exchange for that marriage through this business deal. The Portman merchant family finally got the chance to enter the nobility. Elric was horrified and asked if that meant his bride was basically sold off to them. He didn't want to believe his great love was motivated by such a cold, emotionless financial transaction. The guy panicked upon realizing his terrible mistake in acting cold on their wedding day. Without thinking twice, he threw the door open to get out of there while the maid tried to call him back. He started running frantically down the mansion hallways, wanting to give Tyria a sincere explanation. All he wanted most in that moment of distress was to offer a genuine apology for his silly behavior. The young man wanted to find any justification he could to try and fix the terrible misunderstanding between them. He leans against the wall, feeling the weight of that whole agonizing situation on his chest. He finally stops right in front of his new wife's room and hears the muffled sound of crying coming from the other side, and then peeks through a small crack to spy on her. He sees Tyria curled up, crying hard, her face completely red from sorrow. She is sitting on the floor, looking totally helpless and lonely. The sight of his beloved in that state of pure heartbreak breaks the guy's heart instantly. The moment he saw her crying like that, he slowly stepped back, not knowing how to act. It was right then that he made the drastic decision to put a final end to that forced marriage. Meanwhile, our boy's dad was writing a letter. Elric pushes open the office doors with all his strength. Without hesitating, he demands that the marriage be canceled as soon as possible to spare the young girl. He asks if she only got married to save her family, stating that she was basically sold like merchandise, and begs his father to undo that unfair deal. His father looks at him with terrifying coldness, immediately telling him to shut his mouth, and orders the young man to stop acting like a spoiled brat. The man warns that they belong to the nobility now, and that his son needs to start acting like a true noble. That cold, relentless look from his father marked the guy deeply at that moment. That made the young man realize once more the harsh reality of his own existence in that house. He remembers that he was always seen only as the guilty son who caused his mother's passing during childbirth. To his father, the boy was just a useful tool who had to pay for his upbringing by bringing prosperity. It became clear to Elric that he would never be treated like a real son by that man. He understood once and for all that he was used as a mere business commodity his entire life. Faced with this, the guy decides the only option left for him is to vanish from there forever. He wanted to free the girl who was sold for money, and, at the same time, ruin his father's greedy plans. He gets ready quickly, determined to take a new path without looking back or hesitating. The guy knows that to be completely free, he needs to drop the Portman surname once and for all. The storm keeps pouring down hard outside, covering the wheat fields in darkness. Under heavy rain, the young man walks alone through the overgrown path. On the way, he still wondered if Tyria was crying because she was sold off or because she left her family, or if she was simply crying because she hated the idea of staying married to someone like him, realizing that now those doubts no longer mattered for his future. He decides to set those questions aside. After all, he was heading far away from that life anyway. That's when the scene shifts to a massive military fortress under a heavy rainstorm pouring over the kingdom. A battle-hardened warrior full of scars looks at the guy in surprise upon hearing him speak. The big guy asks if that young boy really came all the way there with the goal of becoming a mercenary, and our Prota answers directly that he did, to hide where he came from. He introduces himself using the fake name Kasha in front of his new commander, ditching the name Elric Portman for good. The young man spent the next 10 years fighting on battlefields. Wielding his sword out of desperation, he became a wandering mercenary who was just looking for a decent place to meet his end. He ended up becoming known by everyone as the feared sword demon, though no one knew his past. He watches the horizon after the end of yet another of his many brutal, tiring battles. Wearing heavy metal armor, the guy is now a true warrior shaped by the pain of war. With his face weathered by time, he keeps the same focused look of someone who has already lost everything he had. He takes a stance alone, ready for combat. With all the strength gathered over years of fighting, he rushes at his opponents, delivering a powerful strike with his blade amid the flames of battle. Even injured and covered in blood, the warrior stays completely focused on defeating his adversaries. The scene changes to a busy tavern where customers chat in hushed tones about recent events. The shop owner is wiping a glass cup when he suddenly hears the door chime ring with someone's arrival. He quickly welcomes the new customer, who just walked into the venue leaning heavily on a cane. It's Elric himself, now wearing regular travel clothes and limping significantly on one leg. He walks slowly through the tavern floor, drawing the quiet, curious attention of the other men present. Some patrons start whispering among themselves, asking if that young guy might be the legendary sword demon. They are surprised to notice that such a famous and powerful warrior has a visibly injured leg. The owner steps up to the counter and asks what happened to him to make him limp like that. The guy downplays the situation and simply replies that it was a small, common injury he picked up on the battlefield. The barkeep asks if it was serious, and Elric explains that he'll have to use the cane for a good while, all while looking at a newspaper. Suddenly, his eyes widen, and he crumples the newspaper page with great force upon reading a shocking piece of news. The shop owner notices the drastic shift in his customer's expression and grows quite worried about that reaction. The man asks if there's something wrong with the news upon seeing the guy's tense, startled face. The sheet of paper prominently features a news headline about the passing of Hovan Portman, Elric's father. A steam train cuts through golden fields, while the sun begins to set slowly on the distant horizon. Sitting in the passenger car, the guy watches the landscape through the window while reminiscing about his childhood days. Seeing his late father's face in a newspaper, notice brought back a lot of old resentment he had been holding on to. He fixes his thoughts on the stern figure of Hovan Portman, the cold man he once called father. The young man recalls when he ran away from home at 14, harboring the innocent hope that his father would look for him. Back then, he was just a boy carrying a very silly, naive wish in his heart. But looking back now, he realizes that little hope wasn't completely pointless. Even though he was treated as just a tool and blamed for his mother's passing, he still wished things had been different. Deep down, despite all the buried bitterness and resentment, he knew he was still that man's son. He secretly wanted to have received a little fatherly affection, but he quickly laughs at himself for having such a thought. All those past expectations were just an illusion, and now the target of his anger was gone for good. Using his father's funeral as an excuse for himself, he decided to begin the journey back to his old homeland. Carrying a mix of emptiness and regret, the guy finds himself trapped in memories from 10 years ago as the train moves forward. The train conductor announces the arrival at the final destination of the trip, the territory of the well-known Wibbin family. The scenery outside is dominated by beautiful golden wheat fields shining brightly under the sunlight. 10 years have passed since his escape, but Elric notices that absolutely nothing has changed around there during all that time. The quiet streets of the village remain lovely and colorful, with the red leaves brought by autumn. He watches people strolling without a rush, in a peaceful setting that seems untouched by the horrors of war. To him, that beautiful rural scene feels both very familiar and strangely distant from his reality. The guy continues his slow journey with the help of his cane, feeling the dirt beneath his feet. A slight smile of relief and nostalgia touches his face upon seeing that his homeland is still so welcoming. He looks out at the vast wheat field that stands as the grand symbol of Wibbin and realizes that everything remains the same. In that moment, he remembers playing hide-and-seek with the village kids back in the day. He also fondly remembers getting scolding from the mansion maids for getting his clothes dirty in the soil. With every step taken toward his old home, the memories of his youth grow clearer and clearer. The young man gets lost for a few moments in the whirlwind of pleasant memories starting to flood his mind. Suddenly, the guy's slow steps come to a complete halt, and he stops right in the middle of the dirt path. Elric directs his gaze forward, suddenly adopting a very serious, deeply concentrated expression. He begins to wonder how the young noblewoman Tyria might be doing after so many years without news. He figures she must be doing fine, and that being such a beautiful lady, she surely must have married someone by now. The guy reaches out his free hand to gently touch the golden ears of wheat warmed by the afternoon sun. Right then, he hears someone shout Tyria's name nearby, and his eyes widen in surprise. A young maid runs over anxiously toward a blonde lady who is carrying a very heavy bundle of wheat. The maid insists on carrying that bundle of wheat instead of the blonde lady, calling her Tyria Wibbin. Elric freezes with emotion, wondering if that lady in front of him is truly his beloved Tyria. The maid rushes closer, addressing the blonde woman as ma'am, while Elric simply watches the interaction in silence. He walks slowly toward her, silently asking himself why she is still there after all this time. She is just as gorgeous as in his memories, wearing a wide sun hat and holding the golden wheat bundles. Elric finally stops in front of her and asks in a gentle tone of voice why she is still living in that place. The two gaze at each other in silence under the golden light of dusk, covering the vast wheat field all around Tyria, is quite surprised to see him there after so many years, and shyly asks the reason for his visit. The guy looks at her with affection and hesitates for a moment before beginning to answer the young lady's question. But before he can say a word, she firmly reminds him that she is still his lawful wife. Hearing that revelation makes the young man smirk, realizing how foolish he had been in his past assumptions. He had naively thought their marriage would be automatically canceled just because he ran away. After all, if things were that simple, she never would have been sold off by her family in the first place. He wonders if his impulsive escape in his youth ended up taking away the last sliver of freedom Tyria had left. The guy realizes with bitterness that, in the end, his selfish choices only made her situation worse. He feels incapable of even protecting his own pride in front of the woman who accepted that fate because of him. In that moment, he mentally defines himself as nothing more than a weak, cowardly, and extremely selfish man. While he spent 10 years focused solely on fighting and swinging his sword on wartime battlefields, she had to face all the loneliness and hardships of that empty life completely alone in the grand mansion. He knows full well he needs to offer her a sincere apology for everything he put her through during all this time, but he questions whether he has the right to do so, or if she even wants to hear his request for forgiveness. The guy feels awkward in her presence and starts stammering, trying to find the right words to bring up the subject. Tyria just watches him in silence, with a very serene, understanding look from beneath her straw hat. Very calmly, the young woman breaks the tense atmosphere and warmly suggests they head inside the house to talk better. She turns around and begins walking back toward the mansion, followed closely by his slow footsteps. The guy walks in silence, supported by his cane, reflecting on the peaceful reception he received from her. Deep down, he would have preferred if she were angry and yelled at him for abandoning her like that. After all, he left her without giving any explanation, and felt he deserved to be treated with absolute fury for it. He imagined she would demand harsh answers about what he intended by showing up out of nowhere after 10 years. Suddenly, the young man's eyes widen as he sees the silhouette of a familiar figure coming out of the grand residence. He goes completely still and breaks into a cold sweat out of nervousness at who is appearing right before him. The wind blows gently across the fields as the two approach the grand entrance door of the mansion in silence. Realizing the guy stopped walking all of a sudden, Tyria turns around and sweetly asks if he's coming along. He swallows hard and tries to hide his massive nervousness under the attentive, curious gaze of his young wife. Gripping the handle of his walking cane tightly, he calmly replies that he is right behind her. The two continue down the rest of the dirt path side by side, surrounded by the vastness of the beautiful golden fields. The majestic Portman family mansion appears bathed in the warm, pleasant shades of the lovely sunset. Tyria gently mentions she will go call the butler and asks him to wait comfortably right there for a moment. She opens the large glass doors and steps into the residence with her light, delicate, and elegant steps. The guy stands outside the house, thoughtfully observing the place he hadn't visited in such a long time. He looks up toward the facade and notices with surprise that the mansion's entire structure remains completely identical. The young man can barely believe 10 long years have passed away from there, as every single detail of the place remains the same. He remembers with precision even the exact number of windows and where the small marks on the wall were located. A nostalgic, subtle smile appears on the guy's lips as he notices his memories are still so vivid. Suddenly, a serious female voice calls out right behind him, directly asking who he is and what he wants. He turns around surprised to see who called him and is deeply impressed upon recognizing the person before him. It's the housekeeper Rhonda, staring at him suspiciously and asking who the guy is looking for in the mansion. The guy flashes a huge smile upon recognizing her right away and shouts Rhonda's name, overcome with emotion. He says fondly that she hasn't changed her appearance one bit, even after 10 long years away from home. He smiles and playfully asks if she really can't recognize her own young master. Rhonda inspects him closely from behind her glasses. Looking quite confused and intrigued by the situation, Rhonda's eyes widen in shock behind her specs as she looks at the man more carefully. She is completely stunned and hesitantly asks if that person in front of her really is her young master. Rhonda steps closer, trembling, and asks with tears in her eyes if he truly is young Master Elric. Elric gives her a warm hug and says it's been a long time, confirming he has finally returned home. Overcome with emotion, she cries and says it really is him, unable to hold back her tears upon seeing the boy again. Rhonda pulls back slightly and comments that she almost didn't recognize him because he changed so drastically. He smiles and agrees. He changed a lot, finding it natural she didn't recognize him right away. But Elric starts thinking about Tyria, remembering when she said she was there because she was his wife. He remembers spending 10 years on the battlefield. While Rhonda notices his distraction and grows confused, Rhonda looks at him worriedly and asks if something is wrong with the young master. Elric thinks that if even Rhonda, who raised him like a mother, barely recognized him, something is fishy. He begins to question how exactly Tyria managed to identify him so quickly. The guy grows visibly tense, and a drop of cold sweat rolls down his face over this lingering doubt. He wonders how she recognized him with just one glance, even though he had changed so much. Meanwhile, a white curtain sways gently in the breeze near a large window. Tyria is standing right in front of that window, calmly observing the outside of the mansion. She quietly watches the emotional reunion between Elric and the housekeeper down below, sensing he's being watched. Elric turns quickly toward the window with suspicion. Tyria gets startled upon realizing he caught her gaze and shrinks back behind the curtain. She takes a deep breath and tries to compose herself while hiding her completely blushed face. Tyria thinks about the prominent scar Elric has right on the back of his neck. She also perfectly remembers his brown hair and his striking eyes. In her mind, absolutely nothing about the young master had truly changed since the last time later. While taking a relaxing bath, Elric still finds all of that very odd. He stays deep in thought in the water, trying to figure out how Tyria Wibben managed to recognize him so easily. The guy then decides to get out of the tub and takes his first step out of the warm water. Elric puts on a white bathrobe and ties it around his waist while staying deeply reflective. Suddenly, his eyes open wide in extreme surprise, and he gasps as he looks straight ahead. He comes face to face with Tyria, who appears nearby wearing only a white towel after her bath. Her face turns bright red with embarrassment upon noticing her husband's presence right there. Mortified, Tyria starts stammering out apologies for the awkward situation. She's on the verge of tears, and Elric tries to reassure her, asking her to calm down first. The guy insists everything is fine and asks her not to cry, reaching out his arms to help her. Tyria looks straight into his eyes, visibly shaken by the sudden closeness between them. At that exact moment, a young maid steps into the room and lets out an ear-splitting shriek. Completely terrified by what she just witnessed, the girl turns and bolts away. She flings a door open with all her force and shouts frantically, asking what on earth is going on. The scene she sees is Elric holding Tyria in a very intimate embrace while she's wearing nothing but a towel. The two stand there extremely embarrassed and frozen by that unexpected walk-in. Tyria hides her face out of sheer shame and softly calls out the young maid's name. Marie Elric tries to explain himself, saying she was about to fall and desperately calling for Marie to wait. Meanwhile, on the defense line of the Chevor Kingdom border, the 5th Regiment prepares the Vanguard Knight LeBron from the Imperial Elite Assault Squad, steps forward with a confident grin. The border guards charge furiously, shouting for everyone to attack and take down the Vanguard Knight. LeBron responds with arrogance, telling them to come at him all at once. Promising to slice every single one of them up, he swings his sword brutally and begins cutting through enemies without showing a shred of mercy. The Chevor soldiers fall into absolute panic upon realizing they are no match for his power. Facing the slaughter, the commander screams orders for everyone to fall back immediately behind the defense line. In the middle of all the chaotic retreat, a mysterious warrior walks calmly in the opposite direction. The Imperial soldiers watch him in confusion, asking themselves if he's just some mercenary hired by Chevor. The young mysterious warrior assumes a firm combat stance and draws his blade with extreme precision. He keeps his red eyes fixed on the opponent ahead, displaying impressive composure. LeBron charges at high speed toward him, throwing a heavy strike to crush him with unbelievable reflexes. The guy nimbly dodges the deadly strike and shifts into position to counterattack. He maintains his cool even in the face of imminent danger and sets up his next move in a calculated way. In a fast, surgical movement, he lands a fatal blow on the dangerous elite knight's neck. The powerful knight drops to his knees on the ground, completely defeated, unable to stop the bleeding. Without showing any hesitation, the young warrior delivers one more quick blow, finishing off his opponent. The knight's lifeless body falls into the muddy ground before the utterly terrified eyes of his allies. The Imperial soldiers stand paralyzed by extreme fear, unable to believe the slaughter of their leader. He introduces himself coldly as Kashida, a simple mercenary hired to serve the kingdom of Chevor. The guy challenges the enemies to attack, warning that he will take down every last man who dares face him. Suddenly, he senses danger coming his way and quickly prepares to defend himself. The young mercenary activates a powerful mana shield around his fist to block the surprise attack. However, a speedy projectile manages to pierce his defense and strikes his left knee head-on. He drops to his knees on the ground in severe pain, using his own sword as support to keep from collapsing completely. The guy bites his lips hard and tries to endure the intense pain from the grave wound he just suffered. From high up on a distant cliff, two mysterious figures watch the scene holding powerful firearms. It's a pair of elite snipers equipped with special goggles and masks covering their faces. His eyes widen as he realizes he fell into an ambush and that the situation has become extremely dangerous. Suddenly, Elric wakes up startled in his bed at the mansion, breathing heavily and brandishing a knife. Heart pounding and covered in a cold sweat, he tries to catch his breath after the terrible nightmare. Realizing he's safe in his room, he slowly lowers the blade and lets out a long sigh of relief. The soft morning light streams through the large windows of the luxurious room, brightening up the space. He looks at the knife in his hands and comes back to reality, realizing he has finally returned and is back home. At that moment, a knock on the door startles him, and he quickly hides the knife under the bedsheets. From the other side of the door, housekeeper Rhonda asks with total calmness if the young master is awake yet. He hesitates for a brief moment, still trying to fully shake off the shock of the recent nightmare. The guy swallows hard, clears his throat, and replies that yes, he's awake. He forces a soft, pleasant smile before saying he just woke up from his sleep. Rhonda politely steps into the room carrying a wooden basin filled with fresh water. Elric notices that all it took was asking for cold water to be served immediately with maximum efficiency. He gets dressed and thinks the clothes are so soft and comfortable they feel like they're made of pure silk. In front of the large mirror, the guy quietly reflects that all of this is a true undeserved luxury for him. He tries to force a friendly smile at himself, but the expression comes out quite awkward. The guy wonders if the time he spent fighting on battlefields ended up freezing his expressions. Rhonda watches him proudly and warmly, comments that he looks much better wearing those noble clothes. The housekeeper then courteously suggests that the young master go downstairs to have breakfast first. She asks what happened to his leg, and Elric lies, saying he fell down a hill out of sheer carelessness. He thinks he could never tell her he was shot in the knee, as he doesn't want to cause any concern. Rhonda teases him, saying he's still the same troublemaker, and he gives a nervous laugh, swearing it was all a misunderstanding. At that moment, the door to the grand dining room opens, and all eyes turn toward the entrance. Tyria appears looking stunning and dressed up, showcasing all the elegance typical of her noble presence. She walks gracefully toward Elric and sweetly asks if he managed to sleep well last night. Instantly, the guy recalls the awkward scene of Tyria wearing only a towel the previous day. Elric turns bright red with embarrassment and replies that he slept well thanks to her, though he feels like a creep. Meanwhile, the young maid Marie glares at him from a distance, labeling him a creep in her mind. Noticing the girl's hostile behavior, Rhonda delivers a comedic smack to her head for prying into private business. As Rhonda drags the rebellious girl away, Tyria kindly wishes her husband a wonderful day. The guy just clears his throat softly to cover his embarrassment and tries to go back to acting natural. Elric wishes her good morning and says pleasantly that he slept very well thanks to his lovely wife. He limps over to the table and asks the new maid's name. Learning that she's named Marie and was recently hired, Tyria awkwardly brings up the fact that Marie called him a creep, making Elric feel insanely embarrassed. He waves his hands quickly, saying it's totally fine, and asks her not to worry about it at all. The guy rests his hand firmly on top of his cane, subtly revealing a few old scars on his skin. He explains he was just curious, because he had never seen the girl working in the mansion in the past. His young wife listens in silence and simply murmurs that she understands, keeping her gentle, thoughtful gaze. The two begin eating breakfast in silence, surrounded by the soft sound of silverware clinking on plates. Tyria calmly enjoys the delicious meal, appearing quite content and happy in that pleasant moment. Suddenly, she raises her eyes toward Elric and hesitates for a second before timidly calling his name. She gathers her courage and decides to address the embarrassing incident that happened the day before. She stammers a bit and specifies she's referring to what happened in the mansion's bathhouse. Tyria begins to apologize, but Elric quickly cuts her off, saying gently that everything is fine. He insists she doesn't need to apologize and asks her to just eat, to which she shyly agrees. Even so, Tyria's face continues to burn with embarrassment, and she can barely look her husband in the eye. She fixes her gaze on her plate, lost in her own confused, embarrassment-filled thoughts. Elric also feels awkward, scratching the back of his neck while repeating his own name mentally. Tyria remembers the moment she saw Elric's body covered only by that bathrobe. She recalls the countless terrible scars on his chest and wonders what kind of tough life he led. The tense, awkward silence returns to rule absolute over the couple's huge dining table. He starts to bitterly regret bringing up the topic, finding the whole mood insufferably tense. To cover his nervousness, he starts poking at his food with his fork at a fast, rushed pace. Tyria is shocked to see the guy devouring breakfast desperately and wiping his mouth on the fly. He gets up in a hurry, gives an awkward thumbs up, and says he has to get going, wishing her a good meal. Surprised by his sudden exit, she just murmurs a short, positive response with blushing cheeks. With a timid smile on her face, she gently wishes him a great day out there. Right after breakfast, the massive Portman mansion gets super busy with the staff's chores. Led by Rhonda, Elric meets with the household staff, who welcome him with open arms and much joy. One of the servants excitedly asks if it's true that he made a move on the lady, calling him a real man among men. However, Marie stays in the back with her arms crossed, angrily muttering that the young master is indeed a creep. The young housemaid loses her patience with the praise and yells at everyone to get a grip and stop that nonsense. Marie tries to keep complaining about his return, but she's quickly held back and scolded by another worker. The seasoned butler Aldio smiles and asks her not to be so harsh, saying she's still too young to understand. He solemnly explains that the supreme duty of a noble is to produce a legitimate heir to carry on the family line. Aldio praises the young master for fulfilling his noble duty after 10 years, while Marie thinks it was just pure instinct on his part. While the butler praises him and Marie labels him the ultimate creep, Elric feels insanely awkward and breaks into a cold sweat. Aldio excitedly asks if he returned for good to produce an heir, drawing a super awkward laugh out of Elric. But in truth, the guy hasn't mapped out any concrete plan regarding what to do with his life from here on out. He plans to rest there because of his knee injury, but wonders how he'd have the nerve to act like the true master. He decides to wrap up the conversation and says he needs to step out, getting support from Aldio, who says his return is what matters. Elric then seriously asks the butler to prepare a carriage, and Aldio promptly accepts the young master's command. Shortly after, an elegant horse-drawn carriage moves down the dirt road amidst the beautiful golden field. From the middle of the vast wheat farm, Tyria silently watches the departure of the vehicle as it slowly moves away. The wind blows gently, making Tyria's blonde hair sway while her eyes follow the carriage. The vehicle continues down the dirt road, surrounded by beautiful trees with leaves in warm autumn colors. The carriage stops at an isolated spot, and Elric steps down to stand before a lonely headstone in the shadow of a tree. The guy stares at the grave with a gloomy expression and sorrowfully whispers that it's been a long time since his last visit. Standing before the gravestone of his late father, Hovan Portman, he murmurs the word with a mix of sadness and respect. The young master inwardly admits he harbored a huge grudge against his father for many years of his life. He regretfully confesses before Hovan Portman's grave that he never wanted their reunion to happen, like that Hovan Portman was the pioneer who built their family from simple merchants into the largest trading house in Wibben, but he made many enemies along the way. The guy bitterly recalls and asks himself if his dad ever smiled or said even a single affectionate word to him. He thinks that if his dad was going to act like the villain of the story anyway, he should have at least stuck around a little longer. The wind continues to blow autumn leaves around Elric, who remains in absolute silence next to Hovan's headstone. He takes a deep breath and mentally admits he no longer feels so much bottled-up bitterness toward his late father. The young man breaks the quiet of the spot by calmly calling for faithful butler Aldio, who was waiting right behind him. He asks how exactly his father passed away, and Aldio seriously reveals that his old master suffered from a severe heart condition. Aldio explains that he hid the illness from everyone until the end, leaving Elric reflecting in surprise over that revelation. The butler shares that, upon realizing his end was near, Hovan poured all his energy into wrapping up his business and liquidating assets. Elric lets out an ironic smirk and comments to the old man that his father was quite an unusual and intriguing individual. He asks aloud why Aldio showed so much loyalty to a man who was known for being so cold and ruthless. With total honesty, the butler replies with a smile that he did it all strictly for the money. Asking what other reason there could be, Aldio notes that the young master curiously didn't ask the question that should matter most at that specific moment. The butler brings up the massive inheritance left by Hovan Portman, pointing out that he turned absolutely everything he could into cash. He continues the explanation, saying that all that immense sum of hard cash strategically accumulated by his father was left entirely as a direct inheritance for the guy, leaving him with the absolute right to claim that whole fortune. The carriage resumes its peaceful journey back through the beautiful golden forest, gently swaying along the path. Sitting comfortably inside the vehicle, Elric rests his chin and asks if his late father left any written will. Aldio says Hovan wasn't the type to do that, explaining that the paperwork only contains direct orders regarding the distribution of assets. The butler genuinely confesses that, despite everything, he still can't comprehend the true motives behind Hovan's decisions. Aldio adds that his former master acted with even greater coldness than usual when handling all matters related to the estate. The butler advises the young man to take all the time he needs to calmly reflect on the fate of that massive inherited wealth. Meanwhile, Elric begins to drift into his thoughts and suddenly recalls his mysterious wife, Tyria Wibben. He questions why she still lives in the mansion, since the marriage should have been voided after his sudden escape 10 years ago. The guy ponders that their matrimony was just a deal arranged out of self-interest, a real business transaction disguised as a marriage. The butler agrees with his reasoning and adds that he forgot to mention a crucial, highly important detail about that union. Aldio reveals that the Portman family now holds a hereditary barony title, which will be automatically transferred to Elric, along with the estate. He clarifies once and for all that the entire inheritance and the noble title belong exclusively to Elric, not to the lady. The carriage finally crosses the gates and stops in front of the impressive entry of the Portman mansion under a clear sky. He gets out of the vehicle and reasons that if Tyria's goal was just money, she would have no reason to keep living there. Elric points out she could have claimed the estate as a proxy and left, but Aldio states that staying was her personal choice. Surprised to learn that staying was a voluntary choice on her part, the young master curiously asks if the butler knows the real reason behind it. Aldio explains that Tyria is a woman of very few words and admits that, to be totally honest, they were never very close. The butler describes that the young lady carries an aura of nobility so striking that it makes her hard to approach. Preventing him from forcing small talk, Elric finds her a complicated person, but Aldio reminds him that she is his wife. Even if the guy considers her a total stranger, Aldio lets out a lighthearted laugh and wisely reassures the young master that every couple starts out exactly that way. Without saying anything more, the guy begins climbing the stone steps of the mansion's entrance with the essential help of his walking cane. Upon entering the foyer, he stops walking when he spots his young wife standing quietly near a grand marble pillar. She slightly turns her gaze away under her straw hat, her cheeks visibly flushed in her husband's presence. Tyria takes a few graceful steps toward him, always maintaining her extremely elegant posture and very delicate gestures. The guy is slightly surprised to see her there and somewhat awkwardly asks if she just returned from being out. With blushing cheeks out of shyness, she answers with another question, wanting to know what time her husband arrived at the residence. She explains she just got back as well, as she was making her way back after spending time tending to the vast wheat field. Looking to break the ice between them, Elric suggests they go inside together, and Tyria accepts the invitation with an affirmative nod. The two begin climbing the mansion's luxurious staircases side by side as the sound of their steps echoes softly through the grand hall. He inwardly regrets starting the conversation, cursing his own mouth for creating yet another stiff, uncomfortable social situation. Even so, he steals a side glance at her and admires how she manages to look so noble and graceful, even in simple farm clothes. The guy tries to search his memory and wonders if she already possessed all that natural elegance 10 years ago when they got married. He vaguely recalls their wedding day, where she looked breathtaking in a lovely white bridal dress, blushing with bashfulness. Back in the present, Elric quickly turns his gaze away, feeling his face heat up with embarrassment from that sudden, vivid memory. Suddenly, Elric loses his balance and almost falls, leaving Tyria quite startled and asking if he's okay. With a quick movement, he manages to firmly plant his cane on the floor to prevent a bad fall. He tries to brush off the pain with a smile, saying he walked too much and his legs just gave out for a second. He apologizes for not being able to carry the bag of wheat for her due to the chronic issue in his legs. Tyria says it's totally fine and that she's used to it, which makes Elric feel guilty for leaving her alone for so long. She explains she got used to heavy work because she learned everything directly from the former head of the family. The guy grows quite thoughtful at that response, recognizing that was exactly his father's strict way of doing things. He remembers his dad was someone who insisted on supervising everything personally, and the wheat fields were no exception. Hoven sold all the businesses and kept only the wheat farm, likely preparing the girl to take over management of the whole operation. Suddenly, both of their steps cease, and they stop climbing the stairs, breaking the rhythm of their silent walk. Elric decides to break the silence again and calls out to his wife, who turns to him with attention and curiosity in her eyes. Standing right in front of Hoven's grand portrait, he asks her directly what her relationship was like with the late head of the family. Simply, she replies that she just learned how to run the business and doesn't remember much beyond that work. Elric looks at her very seriously and asks if his father ever mentioned anything related to him. Bluntly, she denies it and says Hoven never talked about his son, bringing a sense of gloom to the air. He mentally concludes that pairing his cold father with that quiet girl must have resulted in strictly professional conversations. The young man just mutters that he understands. Staring for a few more moments at the painted portrait of his stern, late father Tyria mentions she needs to get back to work immediately, leaving her husband confused as he thought she had finished her tasks for the day. She reveals she still has important paperwork to review, leaving the guy quite surprised by such dedication to her duties. Shocked, he asks if she works out in the field during the day and still reviews documents at night, receiving a nod from her. She says goodbye, mentioning she'll see him again only at dinner, and walks away, leaving Elric thoroughly impressed and speechless. The guy feels a heavy wave of guilt for having run away in the past, realizing he burdened his wife with responsibilities that were his. He reflects that it would be easier to swallow if she held a grudge against him, but she never expressed a single complaint about the situation. Lost in thought, he continues limping down the long, quiet hallways of the mansion while processing all this new information. Suddenly, a loud crash coming from one of the rooms breaks the silence and instantly catches the young heir's attention. He enters the room and finds young Marie on the floor after accidentally knocking over several drawers full of letters. The girl panics, not knowing what to do about the mess, while Elric stands watching her, intrigued by the whole scene. He offers to help, picks up one of the wax-sealed letters, and asks what that huge pile of mail is all about. Marie explains they are letters addressed directly to the lady, leaving the guy quite curious and reflective about the fact Elric notes that there's a truly impressive amount of mail piled up right there on the room floor. Upon reading the sender's name on one envelope, Elric's red eyes widen in deep shock. He realizes the sender is Tyria's own bankrupt family, House Wibben, which has been sending her endless letters. The young man holds the paper tightly and begins reading the text with an extremely serious, focused expression. The letter tells Tyria to stop waiting for someone who isn't coming back, return to the family, and grab all the inheritance she can get. Elric realizes the unfairness of his father leaving the entire fortune to him and nothing to her, who worked hard for 10 years straight. He places the letter back on the desk and thinks that even if she kept all the money, it would still be fair compensation. He leans against the office desk, questioning whether the only reason Tyria stayed there was to get Hoven's estate covering part of his face with his hand. The guy wonders why she acted that way if the goal really was purely financial. He sits in absolute silence in the office, trying to unravel the true mysteries surrounding his wife's actions. The young man fixes his sharp red gaze on a single spot, coldly analyzing every detail of that intriguing situation. He ponders that if it were about greed, she wouldn't have worked in secret and could have easily taken the inheritance a year ago. Elric analyzes a few more documents on the wooden desk, deep in heavy speculation regarding the letters, opening one of the desk drawers. He finds a large stack of stored letters and confirms they are indeed right there. The guy notices the letters started arriving a year ago and always demanded the estate, without Tyria sending back even a single reply. He discovers that some messages went as far as begging for a response, causing the young man to let out a deep, tired sigh. The guy finally understands she was merely protecting all that fortune for the rightful owner, who might never return. Since not even faithful butler Aldio knew about those letters, Tyria must have hidden the whole truth from him completely. Elric walks over to his office window and watches from afar as his young wife works dedicatedly in the golden wheat fields. The guy realizes with emotion that she has been fighting that lonely, tough battle all by herself over the past year. Elric sadly concludes he would have no right to complain, even if she left with everything, wondering why she chose to live like this. Tyria is sitting before the vanity mirror in her luxurious bedroom, looking thoughtful as she gets ready for an important moment. She carefully adjusts a lovely white bow in her long blonde hair, finishing her styling with great delicacy, wearing an elegant blue dress with white details. The young lady exhibits an flawless aura of nobility and grace. Marie watches her mistress from a distance and gets super excited seeing how stunning her lady looks in that dress. The young maid celebrates the fact that young Master Elric finally took the initiative to request a private meeting. Although she still finds his behavior in the bathhouse unforgivable, she decides to let it slide. Since Butler Aldio supports this push, Marie insists that having a legitimate heir would be wonderful for the lady's future, leaving Tyria quite confused by the statement. Oblivious to her mistress's confusion, the girl starts skipping happily around the room, imagining the noble couple's future, to cut off that over-the-top, ill-timed excitement. Tyria reaches out and firmly grabs the maid's outfit. Marie drops to her knees on the floor and looks up at her mistress pleadingly, hoping for some advice or answer. Marie says the master is a cowardly creep for vanishing for 10 years, but agrees with Aldio that it's best for the two to unite for good eyes wide. The maid enthusiastically yells that the couple needs to consummate the marriage ASAP and have an heir right away. Marie starts rambling about having several babies that look like Tyria to prevent them from inheriting Elric's rebellious streak, flustering her mistress. Luckily, firm knocks on the large bedroom door interrupt the girl's fantasies and bring the focus back to reality. Butler Aldio asks if the lady is ready for the meeting, and Tyria calmly answers that she's stepping out now. The two start walking side by side down the carpeted hallways, with the rhythmic sound of their steps echoing softly through the hall. Tyria inwardly wonders what this meeting is about, as it's the first time Elric has requested a conversation on his own initiative. The butler respectfully opens the large, grand lounge doors and formally announces Tyria's arrival to the young master. Elric appears sitting comfortably near the sunlit window and politely invites his young wife to step inside. She enters the room with slow, elegant steps, maintaining a shy expression with her eyes kept slightly lowered toward the polished floor. The soft sound of her high heels echoes through the beautiful hall as she walks calmly toward the table where Elric awaits. The guy takes a sip of his tea in silence, trying to hold back the massive nervousness he feels before starting that tough conversation. The couple settles around the small round table, creating an elegant scene under the natural light streaming through the large glass panes. He begins by offering sincere apologies for opening the document without permission, claiming it got mixed in with other letters, maintaining a very calm, serious tone. The young master asks if he can question her openly about the contents of the letters. Tyria reacts with extreme shock upon seeing the envelope in his hand, immediately placing a hand over her chest at the surprise. Following that, the young lady slowly lowers her head and locks herself in deep silence, hiding her eyes beneath her blonde bangs. Elric grows tense, fearing she might misinterpret his true intentions, thinking he returned only to covet the inheritance left behind. The guy continues, saying he found out she completely ignored all the letters sent by her family over the last year. He explains he called her in to understand why she protected his estate, even without any guarantee he would ever return. He points out she could have taken that entire fortune for herself and wonders about the real motives that stopped her from doing so. To Elric, she was still a complete stranger, which made that whole situation even harder to grasp. The fact that someone so distant protected his wealth for 10 long years raised endless, unexplainable doubts in the guy's mind. Tyria squeezes her hands tightly in her lap, while Elric presses her to explain why she didn't return to her homeland. Breaking the long silence, the girl finally raises her head and speaks only her married surname in a very solemn, resolute way. With an imposing, firm posture, she introduces herself, declaring out loud that she is now Tyria Wibben Portman. She makes it clear she is no longer the young lady of Wibben, but rather the lawful mistress and protector of the House of Portman. From here on, Tyria politely asks to be excused, saying she needs to step out as she still has a lot of important accumulated work to finish reviewing. She turns her back and walks away with firm, confident steps, while the young master just watches her leave from a distance in silence. Elric stands frozen, completely stunned by the unwavering determination shown by his wife in answering his questions. The young lady exits the room with all her usual grace, leaving Elric alone in the grand hall, lost in his own thoughts. He still can't understand why she defended that wealth from everyone when she could have simply kept it all for herself. He recalls the firm words of his young wife as she stated who she really was before everyone in that moment. Her revelation that she acted that way simply because she was his lawful wife resonates with immense force and impact in Elric's mind. He deeply reflects on Tyria's words in his office, focusing on the true meaning of responsibility and duty. He repeats in his head Tyria's proud declaration that she belonged to the Portman family and would defend the honor of that house. In a sudden, intense gesture, he plunges a sharp dagger into the wooden desk to release his built-up tension. He leans against his chair, asking himself if that unwavering sense of duty of a noble wife was the real reason behind her answer. He realizes she did everything out of pure sense of duty, and the girl's admirable attitude instantly reminds him of an old acquaintance from the past. It's the honorable silver-haired knight named Elvers Graham, whose vivid memory reemerges strongly in Elric's mind. Elric met Elvers Graham on the battlefield, back when Elvers was the third son of a noble family at war, and Elric was a mercenary hired by him. They won that war with few casualties, but Elvers ended up disabled and could never fight on a battlefield again. Elvers used to say that was just his duty, as nobles carry the responsibility of setting the example for common folk to the knight, that war was simply the ideal place to fulfill all his obligations and noble duties. At the time, Elric questioned if he wasn't just the son of a concubine. Being half commoner, Elvers smiled and replied that he could also be seen as half noble, and for fulfilling half his duty, he ended up losing half his body. Because of that, he thought it was fair to live the rest of his life resting, so he retired, enjoyed life, and got married a few years later. Back in the present, Elric digs his knife into the table as he remembers that story. He stays deep in thought, repeating to himself the words about responsibility and duty he heard in the past. He knows he can't make up for the 10 years his wife sacrificed, but he feels there's still something he can do for her. Elric thinks another letter regarding the inheritance should arrive soon, since they've been coming non-stop over the last year. The letters always demand an answer, but the sender never visits, likely because they can't travel there. He knows Tyria wouldn't give him an answer even if he asked, as she isn't the type to wear her feelings on her sleeve. Luckily, the guy knows there's a very direct way to find out the truth about all of this. The journey takes him straight to the gates of the imposing Wibben mansion. Arriving at the main entrance, Elric looks at the place and notes that it is indeed the Wibben family residence. He decides to make a direct push, commenting that the place is extravagant and that tackling things head-on is his specialty. Inside the mansion, the owners are already discussing. Surprised that the guy actually decided to return, Tyria's parents complain about his return, calling him an annoying, useless commoner who only popped back up to try and snatch the inheritance. The man asks himself, worried, what they'll do if the son-in-law tries to lay claim to the estate. Tyria's mother walks right behind, using a hand fan to hide her expression of displeasure. The two keep walking down the mansion's luxurious hallways, plotting over the arrival of the unwelcome guest. The father grumbles that he's nothing more than a nobody commoner who only cares about money. The mother agrees and complains that their son-in-law wasted 10 years of Tyria's life, on top of recalling how expensive and tough it was to raise her. The patriarch of the Wibbens fixes his greed directly on the inheritance left by Hoven. He firmly asserts that the guy will have to pay them using that exact fortune. One of the mansion doors is held. Firmly by its golden knob, Elric pushes the doors open and steps into the room where the home's owners await him. The young man introduces himself politely as Elric Portman and apologizes for the huge delay in visiting them. The father-in-law sarcastically remarks that it took 10 years to see his face, while the mother-in-law mockingly comments that he must have had his reasons. Elric gets straight to the point and mentions he saw the letter sent to his mansion, wanting to address that matter. The man brags, saying that since his son-in-law read it, things will be quick, claiming he sent the letter out of pity from watching his daughter live 10 years without a husband. The father-in-law calls Elric shameless for abandoning their daughter after the Weeben family turned commoners into nobles, and brings up the Portman estate. He scoffs at his humble origin and the fact that Elric is limping, saying it's ridiculous to think the guy has any ability or right to manage the assets. He argues it was Tyria who took care of everything, not her husband, and gets ready to speak even more bluntly, assuming his son-in-law isn't too bright. The man openly declares they plan to take the estate as fair compensation for Elric abandoning Tyria for so long. The father-in-law calls him nervy for wanting the inheritance now, doubting the guy would use his father's money for anything worthwhile. Tyria's mother adds that her son-in-law lacks the capacity to manage the territory and laments how much their daughter must have suffered alone. With greedy looks, the two conclude that it's only right for them to keep the estate to put it to good use. Feeling deep disgust, Elric realizes they just beat around the bush to mask the real goal behind it all. He knows their goal is to steal the Portman estate that belongs to him since his father's passing, taking advantage of Tyria being alone. The guy realizes they only care about grabbing the cash, without giving a care about their own daughter, selling her off again out of pure greed. Facing such hypocrisy, Elric hangs his head, finding that whole conversation way too despicable to keep listening to. The guy takes a deep breath and begins to speak, saying that, first of all, he'd like to clear up an important point. He apologizes for not bringing Tyria along, explaining that his wife was very busy with the mansion's duties. The father-in-law flies into a rage and demands he not change the subject, yelling that the talk here is strictly about the estate. The man shouts for his son-in-law to stop being greedy and hand over the assets already, asking if it's fair for him to want everything after disappearing for 10 years. Hearing his father-in-law accuse him of greed, Elric covers his face with his hand, finding it funny and repeating the word ironically with an intimidating glare. He looks at the man and asks what they'll do if he actually decides to be greedy from now on. The father-in-law stammers, scared by the guy's nerve, who coldly reaffirms he will give in to the aforementioned greed and asks what their reaction will be. Elric challenges his father-in-law, asking what exactly he plans to do against him, mocking the fact that the man suddenly went quiet. Elric keeps up the provocation, asking if that big mouth of his father-in-law finally shut up, while the man slams the table in anger. Completely losing it over his son-in-law's audacity, Tyria's father rises from his chair shouting that he's insolent. The guy maintains a cold posture and replies that it seems his father-in-law finally understood who he's dealing with. The young man reminds him that he spent 10 years on the battlefield and knows full well there's no need for extreme actions or displaying useless anger. He knows from experience that even without assigning meaning to every action, nothing in the real situation will actually change. Elric coldly tells his father-in-law it would be better for him to keep his mouth shut if he wants to keep receiving the money he gets today. The guy flashes a mocking smirk as he comments that he finds it hilarious how the one entitled to the estate is his wife, while the in-laws make so much noise without any right at all. As he begins to walk away, Elric explicitly states that, at the end of the day, the only greedy ones there are the in-laws themselves. The father-in-law screams furiously behind his back, threatening to go to the Portman house to ruin him completely and not let him get away with it. Elric just glances back and calmly replies for him to do whatever he wants, as he'll be eagerly waiting for it. Shortly after, Elric's carriage heads back, passing along a lovely tree-lined path. Inside the carriage, the guy lets out a long sigh and covers his face with his hand, showing mental fatigue. He feels like a shameless hypocrite and asks himself if he's really any different from his in-laws, since to Tyria, he's just another sinner. Remembering when he confronted his in-laws, Elric asks himself if he really acted that way to defend his family's honor. He wonders if he didn't say all those harsh things just to stroke his own sense of superiority. He realizes what he felt wasn't pity for Tyria, but rather a strange rush from crushing his in-laws' pride and making them bow down. He recalls his own father's stern face, demanding he pay for the cost of being raised by him. With a mix of distress and irony, Elric realizes he ended up being just as selfish as his late father. Suddenly, the carriage driver pulls the reins hard and lets out a few startled grunts as the vehicle comes to a sudden halt. Curious about the sudden stop, Elric rests his hand on the door to step out and check what's going on outside. As soon as he steps out, the guy feels a strong surge of nausea and ends up throwing up, leaning against the side of the carriage while catching his breath. Still heavily out of breath and with sweat rolling down his face, he mutters softly to himself. He leans against the carriage amidst the fields and bitterly admits he really turned into a horrible person. While venting alone, something on the horizon catches his attention and makes his eyes widen, quite confused. Looking out at the vast golden wheat field under the sunlight, Elric spots a young woman walking in the distance. It's Tyria Wibben, walking peacefully through the area in her simple peasant clothes. The guy stands frozen, watching the young woman, and whispers her name in a barely audible breath. Without hesitating for a single second, he starts taking fast strides in her direction. As he runs, he reflects on how tough Tyria's life must have been during all the years he was gone. He thinks about the suffering caused both by her greedy parents and by his own father. He runs right past the shocked workers who try to call out to him, while lamenting that bad people like him hurt her too. However, hearing footsteps approaching, Tyria turns her head gently to see who is running toward her. He finally reaches her and grabs her hand firmly, feeling the weight of everyone who only made the young woman's life harder. Surprised by his sudden approach and gesture, Tyria asks if something is wrong with the head of the house. Elric bows his head deeply before her in the middle of the wheat field and begins speaking with a choked voice. He offers a sincere apology for leaving her alone for 10 years and for trying to justify his own selfish actions as if they were for her good. Bowed down, the guy deeply regrets all the suffering and trials she was forced to endure without his support. Tyria watches him in surprise while he, head down, takes full blame for that whole painful situation. The scene cuts to a childhood memory when a young Elric used a stick to scare off wild dogs cornering little Tyria. After driving the animals off, the boy turned to her and asked if she was okay and if she got bitten anywhere. Little Tyria replied she was okay, but pointed worriedly at the boy's leg, which was bleeding heavily. Noticing the wound, young Elric started yelling in pain and anger, complaining that those darn beasts left a scar on his leg. A bit bashfully, the little girl shyly asked him to follow her for a moment to get help. While she bandaged his leg, Elric introduced himself as Elric Portman and proudly said he only helped because it happened on his family's land. Seeing her silence, he asked if she was always this quiet and suggested she stay by his side since he'd become a royal knight in the future. The little girl just blushed and remained silent, shyly wringing her hands at his chatter. Right after, she finished the bandage and let him know it was done, making the boy thank her in a somewhat awkward way. Curious, Elric commented that she looked like a young noble, but wanted to know where she learned to treat wounds so skillfully. She softly explained her nanny always took care of her scrapes, but the boy complained he couldn't hear and asked her to speak louder. Little Tyria gets extremely embarrassed by his closeness. Blushing deeply while holding her parasol, Elric says she's way too shy and that if she kept acting so modest, she'd end up never getting married in the future. He then somewhat awkwardly suggests he could take her as his bride if he became a royal knight. Hearing that unexpected proposal makes the little girl's heart beat faster and her face fill with surprise. Flustered by her silence, the boy yells at her not to show off just because she has a pretty face, asserting he only wanted her around to patch up his wounds. He runs off shouting that one day she'd beg to marry him, annoyed at being ignored by the girl until the end. In the present, Tyria looks fondly at a small childhood portrait of her husband, remembering how he was back then. She smiles, thinking he didn't turn into a knight, but feels their reunion was a true work of fate. At the mansion, the housekeeper orders Marie to set a table with special snacks to serve the lady, and the young master, Rhonda and Tyria, walk side by side down the mansion's elegant hallways on their way to meet the master. The young blonde walks thoughtfully, recalling the extremely serious expression her husband showed earlier. She feels a bit anxious, questioning what the real reason could be for him requesting her presence. Rhonda knocks lightly on the office door and informs the young master that Lady Portman has just arrived. The two sit face to face in the office armchairs, starting the conversation in a rather quiet atmosphere. Tyria takes the initiative and shyly asks about the important matter he wanted to discuss with her. The guy nods, explaining he indeed called her there because he felt there was something very important that needed to be said. He gazes at her sincerely and deeply, delivering a very honest, direct apology. The young lady is left completely speechless and, surprised, asks what exactly he'd be apologizing for. Elric explains he needed to apologize for leaving her behind and running away right on their wedding day, 10 years ago. He acknowledges he acted foolishly and impulsively in his youth. Without measuring the serious consequences of his reckless actions, the young man brings up all the pain she endured and the tough times she spent alone, justifying why he's asking for forgiveness, even if late. With his eyes fixed on his wife, he asks sincerely if she'd be able to accept his apologies for everything that happened. Tyria answers calmly, calling him the head of the family, and asserts he has no reason to ask for her forgiveness. She sweetly explains she never held resentment and that the decision to remain at the Portman mansion was entirely her choice. Tyria looks at him and adds that, knowing his heart wouldn't be at peace otherwise, she would make a decision. With a beautiful, tender smile on her face, she officially declares she accepts her young husband's apology, leaving him surprised. Hearing his wife's understanding response, a genuine, relieved smile appears on the guy's face. He thanks her from the heart for the forgiveness granted, warmly calling her my lady. Right after, the two stand up and start walking together through the office, maintaining a much lighter mood. Elric asks if she's comfortable walking, and she says yes, focusing her attention on what really matters from here on out. The guy apologizes for taking up her time knowing she's busy, but Tyria asks him not to talk like that. As it's no trouble, Tyria calls his name in a hesitant tone and, getting Elric's attention, gathers courage to make a special request to her husband. Blushing deeply and with a shy gaze, she asks him to change the formal way he refers to her as my lady voice, trembling and cheeks red with embarrassment. She stammers, suggesting he call her wife from now on. Unable to hear clearly due to the soft tone she used, Elric steps closer, confused, asking what she had said. At the exact moment of the reveal, Marie flings the room door open noisily, cheerfully announcing that snack time is ready. The sudden fright causes Elric to lose balance with his cane, tripping clumsily and falling toward Tyria. The two end up crashing down together, and Elric lands directly on top of his wife's chest, leaving both in an awkward spot. Witnessing the scene, Marie and Aldio are shocked and get the wrong idea, joking that the two were already making plans for an heir. Elric turns bright red and shouts at the butler to clear up the misunderstanding, while Tyria stammers, surprised right beneath him. Aldio quickly covers Marie's eyes to usher her out, apologizing for the intrusion and teasing that the lady was being devoured. The butler gives a thumbs up, promising to tell the staff never to disturb the couple, further irritating the guy who tries to deny it. Thoroughly embarrassed and flailing his hands, Elric tries to get off her quickly to reduce the awkwardness. Lying down and extremely flushed, Tyria softly asks him to move back, making the guy desperately apologize for the accident. Before closing the door for good, Aldio steals one last peek with a wink and tells them to enjoy themselves, ignoring his master's shouts under the mansion's starry night sky. Elric's embarrassed yell denying the whole situation echoes in a comical way. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight illuminate the beautiful, quiet halls of the Grand Portman residence. Rhonda enters Elric's bedroom with her usual polite posture and asks if the young master is already up for the day. Wearing a light white shirt, Elric flashes a radiant smile and wishes the housekeeper a good morning, appearing in a great mood. Surprised by his light-hearted attitude, Rhonda remarks that he seems in excellent spirits and asks if something great happened last night. Rhonda teases the guy, asking if by any chance they might have news about an incoming heir for the family. Elric turns red with shame and denies everything, saying what Aldio told her is a lie, while the housekeeper chuckles at his reaction. However, Rhonda shifts her tone and warns that he can't simply brush off last night's event as a mere accident. She looks at him sternly and asks if the young master really doesn't understand the gravity of this whole situation. She explains that 10 years of waiting weigh much heavier on a woman and advises her master never to let Tyria feel lonely again. In her room, Tyria wakes up lying in her comfy bed, still holding the small portrait with great affection. She stretches with a sweet smile on her face, feeling much more energized and refreshed than on any other morning. Looking at the picture of her husband as a child, she wishes him a good morning in her thoughts and asks if the head of the house slept well. As she sets the portrait on the table, she feels genuinely happy noting that recent events brought her closer to Elric. Excited and full of plans, the young blonde decides that from now on, she'll make a point to greet her husband every morning. Outside the mansion, the day breaks sunny over the region's vast golden wheat fields. A short while later, the couple gathers in the grand dining room to enjoy the first meal of the day together. The breakfast plate is served with fried eggs, crispy bacon, and toast carefully prepared by the chefs. Tyria quietly enjoys the meal, displaying her usual calm, elegant posture throughout. Elric tries to eat, but feels insanely awkward due to the memory of the little accident from the previous day. He blushes, remembering her face so close to his, and tries to shake off those embarrassing thoughts to focus. When his wife suddenly calls his name, the guy gets such a fright he stammers out of sheer nervousness when replying. Gathering courage, Tyria timidly asks if he has any free time on his schedule that day to go out accompanied by her. The young heir's eyes widen, caught off guard by his wife's unexpected invite for a private outing. Quickly, she blushes and tries to explain, saying it's just to do an inspection of the territory before the harvest festival, understanding the situation and wanting to put her at ease. Elric agrees with a smile and mentions the traditional harvest festival. He accepts the invite very kindly and assures her he'll make a point of joining her for the entire land inspection. Relieved and very happy with her husband's positive answer, Tyria lowers her head with a gentle smile on her lips. In the mansion's walk-in closet, the maids help their mistress try on clothes, asking if the dress fit isn't too tight. Tyria asks Marie to hold part of the garment. While the other workers compliment how well the style suits her, Rhonda instructs Marie to keep working there and decides to step out to head to Elric's quarters to help him get dressed too. Upon opening the door, the housekeeper is impressed to see that the young master already finished getting ready on his own quite fast. However, looking closer at the guy's outfit choice, Rhonda's expression immediately shifts to pure disapproval. Elric emerges wearing rugged leather clothes and a giant hat, proudly arguing that it's the ideal gear for heading out. Outraged, Rhonda drags him back into the room, complaining that he looks like a troublemaker and reminding him he's going on an inspection, not to war. The housekeeper shuts the bedroom door firmly, set on making her master change clothes no matter what Elric tries to pull away, and insists she let go, claiming with conviction that he's perfectly capable of dressing himself. Turning a deaf ear to his complaints, Rhonda authoritatively shoves him onto the bed and orders him to stay sitting obediently. She flashes a triumphant smile as she puts on her gloves, declaring that nobles need to wear clothes fitting their dignity. She starts stripping off Elric's dark, rugged pieces, ignoring the guy's protest as he begs her to stop. The guy bursts out laughing out of desperation and asks again for her to just pick the suit and leave the room to give him peace. Rhonda mocks him, asking if he's embarrassed in front of her, bringing up when he was a mischievous child, which makes Elric deny it annoyance. Determined to finish the job, she firmly grips his shirt collar while her master tries to get her to stop. The housekeeper pulls the garment hard, telling him to take it off at once, yanking a gasp of surprise out of Elric with the sudden tug. Pulling the shirt back, Rhonda suddenly freezes in shock and covers her mouth with her hands, a look of deep horror on her face. The scene reveals the guy's chest and abdomen completely covered in dozens of deep scars from past battles. Eyes filling with tears at the sight of the terrible marks, the housekeeper horrifiedly asks what actually happened to his body. Elric tries to lighten the mood with an awkward smile, commenting that was precisely why he wanted to dress himself. Rhonda approaches him, visibly shaken, and begs the young master to tell her everything he suffered in those 10 years away from home fondly. He rests her gloved hand against his face and apologizes, promising to reveal the whole truth about the past at the right time. He looks into the housekeeper's eyes and makes a special plea, begging her to keep those scars a secret from Tyria. Deeply emotional, Rhonda clenches her fist against her chest and tries to hold back the tears starting to stream down her face. She accepts the request and decides that from now on, only she will help the master get dressed, making the guy genuinely thank her for the support. A short time later, Elric heads downstairs to the entry and asks the butler if the carriage for the trip is fully prepped. Now wearing an elegant, perfectly tailored dark blue suit, the young heir exhibits a confident, very charming look. Aldio comments with a smile that he thought Elric would show up dressed like a bandit and make the lady faint, but sees he worried for nothing. Elric admits he almost did, but Rhonda saved him, and Aldio agrees, saying the housekeeper's good taste is truly reliable. Aldio thanks the young master for waiting. While Elric turns around upon sensing someone approaching down the hall, Tyria appears looking breathtaking and says that, since it's their first time going out together, she dressed up a bit more, asking how it looks. Thoroughly embarrassed and cheeks red, Elric stammers, saying he thinks she looks very pretty. Tyria shyly thanks him, while Rhonda just lets out a quiet sigh upon seeing how happy the young lady is. With the compliment, Elric asks if they can depart, and Tyria promptly accepts, walking together toward the carriage waiting for them outside arriving at the local market. One of the residents yells for his buddy to look at who just showed up there. The locals in the Portman Territory market start gossiping in surprise, asking if the boy who ran away from home really came back. Elric greets the people with a pleasant smile, asking if everyone is doing well, while the folks welcome the heir home. The couple keeps walking and soon reaches the bustling produce market section of town. An older lady merchant spots the guy and asks, extremely surprised, if it's really him right there in front of her. He greets her cheerfully, and the lady gets emotional, saying that little boy finally returned all grown up and dependable. Further ahead, a wooden sign points the way to the inn and local convenience shops. A purple-haired man spots the group and excitedly comments on Elric's presence in the village. Another local stands open-mouthed, asking surprised if the young master really returned to the territory. They notice his leg and ask what happened, making Elric make up that he just got hurt a bit, which worries the locals. Suddenly someone shouts from afar, asking if Boss Elric really came back. Catching the protagonist's attention, Elric immediately recognizes his childhood friend Bart, who runs toward him with a massive smile on his face. The two approach quickly and share a firm, nostalgia-filled handshake to celebrate the reunion. Elric jokes that Bart hasn't changed a bit, while his friend comments that the prota changed so much he almost didn't recognize him. Bart respectfully greets Tyria, and she returns the greeting wishing him well, which the guy enthusiastically confirms. Bart invites Elric to swing by his place during the party later so they can grab a drink together. The guy accepts the invite with a friendly smile and says goodbye to his friend, saying he'll see him later. Bart waves goodbye from afar while watching the young couple keep walking peacefully down the street. He smiles and thinks he never imagined those two would get hitched, but admits they make a handsome couple. Time passes, and the carriage follows its path back along the road flanked by vast wheat fields under the sunset. Inside the vehicle, Tyria concentrates on reading a book while Elric observes her in silence. Looking closer, Elric notices the book is a botanical guide featuring drawings of plants and flowers. Curious about his wife's reading, the guy decides to break the silence and softly calls her name to chat. Tyria looks up from the book with blushing cheeks and asks what the young master wishes. He reveals he'd like to help run the territory from now on and asks her to teach him the tasks. The guy explains she's been pushing through alone until now and that he wants to take on his duties as head of the family. She shyly hides her face behind the book while he assures her he can be helpful if she teaches him properly. Tyria secretly smiles behind the pages, thinking about how much her husband has grown into someone mature and dependable. With her heart racing with happiness, she finally lowers the book and holds it tight against her body. She asks with a serious look if she can be strict with him, the same way she learned from the former head of the house. The guy lets out a light chuckle and warmly says she can be as strict as she deems necessary. He asks if his father was really that tough, and Tyria explains he was, but that she never got scolded because she picked things up super fast. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to nighttime in a bustling tavern located right near the Chevor border. The venue is packed with customers chatting loudly and drinking in a rather noisy, chaotic vibe. Suddenly, someone wearing red boots steps into the establishment and commandingly barks for all the fools to listen up. The man behind the counter stops wiping a glass immediately and looks surprised toward the tavern entrance. A red-haired girl in a dark cloak appears at the door and coldly warns she won't ask the same question twice. With a sharp gaze, she asks everyone directly where the legendary sword demon Kasha is located far away. The sunset paints the sky above the grand Portman mansion in orange hues. In the residence's quiet office, only the constant sound of a feather quill gliding across paper can be heard. Elric asks if his wife always handles this much paperwork, and she answers, it only gets this packed during these seasons. Hesitant, she pauses her writing and calls his name, prompting the guy to tell her to say whatever she wants. Tyria somewhat timidly asks if he'd agree to give a speech at the Harvest Festival to celebrate his official return home. Elric thoughtfully repeats the idea of giving a celebratory speech for the Harvest Festival. He recalls back when leaders shouted on the battlefield demanding the death of the Empire's enemies. Back when he operated as the feared mercenary Kasha, he never gave a care about motivational speeches. The guy was never in a position to lead and inspire people, nor did he ever intend to. He perfectly remembers the one true reason he stepped foot on those bloody battlefields. At the end of the day, Elric just needed any random target to unleash all his aimless rage onto the young man, fiercely slashed through every opponent that popped up in his way. Without hesitating for a single second, he acted practically like a rabid dog, tearing his enemies apart one by one without mercy. With that dark past, the guy thinks someone like him would never have the right to deliver a nice speech. Tyria calls him back to reality, making Elric quickly apologize and admit he got distracted. He then proposes a different idea, suggesting he stand right beside her while she delivers the address herself. The young lady accepts the proposal, slightly blushing, deciding she'll do the speech at the Harvest Festival herself. Tyria smiles, thinking that, for this year, just having her husband right there by her side is more than enough. On the day of the festival, Tyria gives a speech thanking all the residents for the hard work that allowed for that beautiful celebration. She wishes everyone enjoys the big party to the fullest, to celebrate the harvest after so much effort. The entire gathered crowd celebrates joyfully, with enthusiastic shouts and tons of excitement. Elric offers his arm to his wife and asks if they should also go check out the event's attractions. The citizens notice the noble couple approaching and point excitedly at their arrival at the fair. A local woman approaches gently and offers a plate of homemade food for Tyria to try right after. Another resident offers a mug of ice-cold beer for Elric to refresh himself. The couple thanks everyone and wishes all of them a great harvest festival in the village mid-walk. Tyria suddenly widens her eyes upon spotting something super interesting straight ahead. She excitedly points and asks her husband to look in a specific direction to check out the new attraction. On a small improvised stage, a host announces the performance of a talented royal court jester. The performer reveals that the big, rare show tonight will be the classic sword-swallowing trick. He starts swallowing the metal blade in front of everyone, claiming it's a show fit for the royal palace itself. The audience, especially Tyria, starts clapping super excitedly at the impressive display. Elric, however, watches it all with a completely bored face, which catches his wife's attention. She asks if he didn't think that was incredible, and Elric explains he's just seen plenty of people swallow swords in the past. Continuing their walk, the two pass by a target knife-throwing game booth. The booth owner calls Elric over to play, and the kids around get eager to see the master in action. The man promises to give a nice prize if the young man manages to hit the target with hanging apples. Elric hesitates, commenting, "It's been a while since he held a knife," but the kids beg to see his skills. Tyria affectionately holds his arm and suggests he give the game a shot, since the local kids want to see it so much. The guy gives in to his beloved's request and walks up to the throw line holding a few knives in hand. The game operator tries to ease the air, telling him in a friendly way not to get too nervous. But before the man can even finish talking about hitting two knives, Elric launches them all at once and skewers the center of all three apples. The booth owner stands frozen in terror at the absurd precision. While the kids scream in awe at the feat, Tyria is absolutely delighted by her husband's talent and starts clapping, her eyes shining with pride. Seeing the merchant's terrified reaction, Elric breaks into a cold sweat, asking himself if he should have pretended to be bad at the game to brush it off. He chuckles awkwardly and says it was just beginner's luck, hoping he didn't embarrass himself. Tyria assures him it was amazing and that he looked like a true knight, leaving the young man unsure how to respond. He notices she's way more upbeat than usual and feels genuinely happy to see her enjoying the festival. The game owner finally recovers from the shock and hands over the well-deserved prize to the guy with an awkward smile. The man explains the one prize is a nice basket of eggs prepared by the local merchant association itself. Elric decides to donate the eggs to the village boys, who celebrate happily and praise the heir's great kindness. Tyria watches him with much affection and compliments the sweet gesture he had toward the young locals. Elric reveals he remembered his childhood, when he won similar eggs and got super hyped. Finding a golden egg inside, Tyria laughs and recalls that he traded that golden egg for a massive helmet that looked like a giant bucket on his head. Elric stops instantly and, confused, asks his wife how she could know such an old detail like that. Tyria stammers nervously and tries to make up that he was super famous in the village, saying rumors about him being a troublemaker were everywhere. She turns her gaze away blushing, thinking she could never tell her husband the truth. She lacks the nerve to confess she watched him all the time, because she already wanted to be his bride way back then. Tyria is snapped out of her daydream when Elric softly calls her name, interrupting her thoughts. He extends his hand with a warm smile on his face and lets her know the main party is about to start, inviting her to the square. She happily accepts the invite and holds his hand affectionately, agreeing to go celebrate together. Arriving at the square at night, a presenter holding a torch announces the official start of the party's lighting ceremony. Bart thanks everyone for coming and asks for a round of applause for the young lord and his beautiful wife, praising her beauty. The crowd laughs merrily, while Elric amusedly thinks about how much his childhood friend knows how to butter people up. Bart continues the announcement enthusiastically, wishing glory and great prosperity to the entire Wibbin region. Suddenly, he shocks everyone by announcing an official kissing ceremony between Elric and his beloved wife, Tyria. The two widen their eyes at the same time, and their faces turn bright red from absolute embarrassment. Tyria full-on panics at the thought of having to kiss her husband in front of everyone right there. Meanwhile, Bart keeps hyping up the crowd, torch in hand, right in the center of the village. He repeats the announcement with energy, making the whole crowd focus their attention on the young noble couple. Bart excitedly presses for the kiss between the couple, drawing laughs and eager cheers from everyone present. Elric and Tyria exchange super bashful looks, not quite knowing how to react under so much pressure. Bart playfully tells his boss to hurry it up, making Elric mentally grumble about how nosy his friend is. The friend then rallies the whole crowd to shout together, encouraging the Lord to build up courage once and for all. The entire town starts chanting in unison, demanding the kiss, leaving the two even more flustered by the situation. Elric turns to face his wife and asks for a moment, leaving the young lady somewhat confused. Without warning, he firmly grabs her by the waist and dips her back in an elegant, super romantic posture. Tyria is totally taken by surprise by her husband's bold move as his face comes close to hers. He whispers an apology and explains the crowd won't stop shouting unless they play along with the festival's game. She silently accepts her partner's plan, but decides she won't just fake it half-heartedly. Tyria surprises Elric by pulling him by the neck and giving him a real kiss, deciding not to do that without real feeling. seeing the passionate kiss. The people in the square go wild and start celebrating with loud cheers and applause. Under the glow of the full moon, everyone shouts, wishing their love lasts forever and brings glory to the region. The scene shifts to the darkness of night at the mansion, where the fast heartbeat of someone can be heard. Tyria is in her room, lying in bed, pressing her pillow against her face, totally mortified by what she did. She pulls the pillow away to breathe, still out of breath and feeling her cheeks burn with shyness. The young lady recalls the passionate kiss and inwardly freaks out over the nerve she had in front of her husband. She worries if he'll find her weird from now on, spending the rest of the night unable to sleep out of anxiety. On the other side, Elric is also wide awake in his room, touching his lips and thinking about his wife. The story shifts focus to the Grand EW residence located in Whitewick in the prosperous kingdom of Armen. Inside a luxurious office, an elegant man wearing glasses calmly takes a sip of tea. The secretary approaches and informs President White that the Imperial Army breached the border defense line. She reports that, without the legendary warrior Kasha fighting on the front lines, the Allied defenses are falling without resistance. Duke Edward White, known as the Golden Gong, smiles and comments that focusing on taking Kasha out of commission was a genius move. Young Agnes Blackmere, the Duke's secretary, listens to his orders attentively while maintaining a cold posture. Agnes questions if it's safe to let those regions fall into Imperial hands, given that they hold many shares in their group. The Duke explains the war has lasted 7 years and that the Allies only survived this long because of Kasha and the group's funds. He takes another sip of his tea, stating with contempt that those regions have lost all ability to pay off their debts. The noble plans to reclaim their shares and smuggle out the wealthiest figures from those regions before everything completely collapses. As she pours more drink for the Duke, Agnes neutrally comments on how sly her boss's plans are. The man pretends to be offended by the jab and argues he's just doing his duty as a true noble of Armen. The secretary changes the subject and asks if it's really safe to let Kasha live peacefully after everything that happened. With a calm, clever smile, the Duke asserts that Warrior no longer exists, being now just Elric Portman. Agnes suggests they should have taken his head right from the start, making the Duke sweat thinking about how dangerous it would be to fail against the guy. The Duke reminds her of when the warrior managed to block a supersonic shot using his mana shield, something impossible for a regular human. The Duke explains it would have been a waste to take him out, making Agnes ask intrigue what he means by that. Edward comments that the guy is a natural mercenary, very similar to himself in some aspects, but with one crucial difference. He reveals Elric doesn't operate solely for his own gain, something his secretary admits is unusual for a mercenary. With that weakness in mind, the Duke asserts he plans to keep the guy completely under the palm of his hand. The man predicts that without Kasha in the war, the conflict will soon stall. Forcing several kingdoms to knock on his door for funds, Agnes deduces he will use the guy's existence to control the balance of the war and rack up even more wealth for the group. The Duke's eyes practically shine with greed as he realizes how smart his assistant is and how well she grasps his plans. He jumps out of his chair, celebrating and praises the girl's sharpness, saying he loves how smart she is. Edward tries to approach with open arms to give a celebratory hug, but she coldly refuses. Without any hesitation, the secretary lands a painful strike right on the Duke's mouth to keep him away. She tells him to cut the nonsense and warns she won't go easy on him just because he's young, leaving the boss whining on the floor. Shortly after, the day breaks clear and sunny over the beautiful Portman family mansion. In the dressing room, Rhonda asks if the young master's outfit is too tight, and he assures her it fits perfectly. Elric starts bringing up a pending matter, but suddenly stops upon spotting his wife entering the room elegantly. Seeing her husband so dressed up, Tyria immediately blushes and calls out to him softly and warmly. The guy also feels super flustered seeing her and stammers out a greeting with red cheeks. Rhonda notices the romantic mood and decides to step in with a welcoming smile to help the young couple with the awkwardness. With great discretion, the housekeeper decides to slip out quickly to give the two lovebirds some privacy. Elric scratches the back of his neck super awkwardly while watching his faithful housekeeper sneak out of the room. Rhonda intriguingly asks if the two had a fight, commenting she heard rumors they were head over heels during the festival. Desperate, Elric tries to explain that Bart riled up the crowd, but the housekeeper focuses only on the fact that the kiss happened, thoroughly embarrassed by the topic. The young heir quickly changes the subject, asking who is arriving that day. The housekeeper informs that an important trade delegation from the Western Kingdoms is about to arrive in the territory. Elric turns serious instantly and repeats surprised that they originate from the Western Kingdoms. She explains the local wheat attracts several nations and that this year, even the prosperous kingdom of Armen entered the bidding war. Worried, he fears being recognized by old enemies from the west and ending up bringing chaos to the territory due to past grudges. Rhonda warns that usually Taria handled this, but now it's his duty to show up, and the guy accepts before receiving wishes for a good trip. While already at the busy train station, Aldio walks alongside the protagonist and asks him not to get so nervous. The old man advises the heir to just greet them formally as taught, and Elric thanks the butler for the support. Elric tries to calm himself down, thinking that no survivor from the battlefields would come all the way here just to trade wheat. He discreetly touches his dagger hidden under his jacket, inwardly hoping he won't need to use it. At that moment, the chug of the train echoes through the station, and the massive iron convoy finally starts coming to a stop. The carriage door opens, and the first passengers begin stepping off onto the Wibbin station platform. Elric gives a formal bow and officially welcomes the delegation members on behalf of the Portman House. The guy starts giving notice about the prepped carriages, but suddenly freezes in shock upon recognizing a person in the group. The mustachioed man widens his eyes in terror and stammers, asking if he is the legendary mercenary Kasha back in the kingdom of Armen at the Grand EW Mansion, someone asks surprised who just arrived for a visit. The Duke dashes hurriedly through the palace hallways, commenting that important person came without giving anyone a heads up. He flings open the main hall's golden doors at once, eager to receive the mysterious guest. The Duke opens his arms happily and shouts the visitor's name, warmly calling her sister Ygritte. The scene reveals Valentina, the legendary Flame Heron, and one of the largest shareholders in the EW group, sitting imposingly on a couch. The man picks her up in the air joyfully, joking that she seems to have grown quite a bit since their last meeting. With a scary look and radiating heat, the red-haired young woman coldly orders him to let her down before she burns him alive, trembling in terror at his partner's serious threat. Edward immediately drops the playfulness and apologizes. Valentina gets straight to the point and asks if he has already uncovered the current whereabouts of the legendary Kasha. The Duke scratches his head tensely and tries to dodge. Reasoning that the guy is hiding like a ghost and is tough to track down, annoyed, the redhead threatens to pull all her shares from the EW group if he doesn't find the location of the sword demon. Valentina squeezes his cheeks hard, demanding he find the warrior, or at least figure out his exact whereabouts. She turns her back with determination, making her large, dark cloak flap with the force of her movements. Exhibiting a serious, heavily focused face, the young redhead proves she won't give up on her search for anything in this world. Valentina warns she won't give him much time and demands he at least find out where Kasha is, making the Duke resignedly agree. Right after, she slams the office's grand golden door with great force on her way out. Agnes asks if he's really going to reveal the mercenaries' whereabouts, since an encounter between those two would be completely unpredictable. The secretary switches topics and wants to know if he already dispatched the trade delegation to the Wibbin region. He confirms the dispatch, but Agnes doubts the guy will take the group's trade bait, since the old Kasha would never do that. However, Edward assures that the current head of the Portman family would be a fool to turn down the irresistible offer he prepared. Far away, the train carrying the trade delegation speeds along, cutting through the plains toward Wibbin. Inside one of the cars, the nobles of the delegation appear extremely nervous and apprehensive about the trip. The three men talk in low voices, exchanging looks of pure mutual tension and concern. The man from the delegation stares into space in silence, visibly tense about their travel destination. The trade delegation's train finally pulls up to the platform at the Wibbin station. The doors open, and the distinguished passengers begin stepping off with firm strides. Elric gives a polite bow and officially welcomes the entire entourage that just arrived. He starts talking about the carriages ready to take them to the mansion, but suddenly freezes upon noticing a man in the group. It's Lord Polo, who stares at the protagonist wide-eyed and starts stammering, unable to believe what he's seeing. His companions ask what's wrong with him, while Elric freaks out over having to run into that exact man right there. He knows that if his identity is exposed, the entire territory will be in danger, needing to hide the truth at all costs. Polo panics and shouts to turn the train around, but Elric cuts in pretending composure and apologizes for the delay in introducing himself. With a forced, friendly smile, he formally introduces himself as Elric Portman, the current leader of the noble Wibbin family. Polo shakes with nervousness and asks himself if that young man is really just the head of the Portman family and not the feared Kasha. Elric asks if he's okay since he looks so pale, and Polo calms down thinking the legendary mercenary would never act like a fool. Polo fixes his gaze seriously and starts remembering the last time he saw Kasha face to face, about 5 years ago. Back then, the lord had been assaulted in the middle of a luxurious noble hall because of his immense arrogance. The guests at the event started whispering in shock over the violent scene that just took place there. Everyone stood jaw-dropped seeing someone challenge and strike an influential noble. So directly down on the floor, Polo yelled enraged, asking how a mere nobody dared commit such insolence against him. The guy calmly adjusted his gloves and replied with disdain, questioning who the noble thought he was to insult his family. Out of patience for speeches, he delivered a hard slap to the man's face, using his own white glove. The young man challenged the arrogant noble to an official sword duel to settle that major insult to his honor. Polo furiously accepted the challenge, barking orders for the guards to bring 2 swords for combat immediately. However, young Elvers Graham appeared rushed in his wheelchair, demanding the 2 stop that madness. Hearing his superior's firm voice, the guy stopped instantly and looked back with a cold face. Elvers apologized humbly for his companion's behavior, but the lord insisted it was already too late for apologies. Polo kept complaining until interrupted by Elvers, who coldly ordered the guy to ask the lord for forgiveness. Upon hearing the name Kasha, Polo completely froze in pure dread, recalling that warrior's terrible reputation. The lord perfectly remembers how the mercenary's cold, killer gaze almost froze his soul out of pure fear. Returning to the present, Polo calms down and pretends everything is fine, making Elric celebrate in relief and invite him to lead the way. Even while trying to hide his massive nervousness, Polo keeps mentally cursing the warrior for still haunting him. Shortly after, the entourage's carriages travel toward the noble family's grand main mansion. The driver notifies everyone they are drawing close to the grand residence and asks them to prep for stepping off. Upon arriving at the entrance, lovely Tyria and her faithful maids are already waiting eagerly to welcome them with much charm. She formally introduces herself as Tyria and says it's a great honor to host the representatives from the West. She notices their fatigue from the long journey and kindly suggests everyone rest first in their quarters. The young lady orders Rhonda to escort the guests to their rooms, and the housekeeper promptly accepts the command. Later, in the quiet of the night, firm knocks on the door echo in one of the mansion's guest rooms. Polo, who was relaxing comfortably in an armchair, asks somewhat intrigued if it's room service at that hour. Getting no immediate response, he grumbles annoyed and walks slowly toward the door to open it. He opens the door, complaining he doesn't need anything and asks not to be disturbed, but suddenly freezes seeing who is there. It's Elric himself, displaying a cold, piercing glare as he calls him by name, saying he'll unfortunately have to disturb him. Coming face to face with that intimidating look from the young master, Polo collapses onto the room floor, consumed by complete terror. Polo points a shaking finger and screams, terrified that he recognizes those eyes and that he really is the sword demon, Kasha. The lord's scream of terror echoes outside the room while he frantically repeats that he discovered the truth. Seeing there's no way out, Elric decides to stop pretending and coldly assumes his true mercenary identity. Polo asks desperately what he wants. Assuring he already apologized in the past for the incident between them, Elric sits comfortably in an armchair and recalls the day the noble severely insulted his family. Elric looks at him coldly and states he doesn't remember accepting those cheap apologies. Back then, Elric asks if he's going to stay lying on the floor and invites him to sit and talk business, leaving the man confused. The guy asks if Polo's goal there wasn't precisely to negotiate Wibbin's wheat, calling him by his full title of Lord. With the atmosphere extremely tense, the two now sit face to face to start an unexpected business negotiation. Polo swallows hard and keeps sweating out of pure nervousness under the protagonist's firm, intimidating gaze. Elric breaks the silence by calmly commenting he had a meeting with Lord Oogle before heading to that room. Polo stammers, asking what Oogle said, and Elric reveals he received a very tempting trade offer from his rival Polo. Nervously asks if Oogle offered to buy Wibbin's entire wheat production all at once for the Empire. Oogle confirms yes, explaining the purchased wheat would be distributed across the West through the Kingdom of Armen. The Empire representative offers to pay a generous commission on that distribution directly to the Portman House. He adds that the only condition required would be selling the whole stock of wheat. Exclusively to the Kingdom of Armen, Ugil wraps up saying he trusts the guy will make the wisest decision as the new head of his noble family. He flashes a clever smile as he bids farewell to the heir, displaying total confidence in his business move. Upon hearing the details, Polo slams the table hard, cursing the Kingdom of Armen for acting so slyly. He yells furiously about being gone behind their backs. Calling Oogle a venomous snake for double-crossing them, Elric takes advantage of his moment of rage and suggests making an alternative deal, leaving the Lord surprised by the proposal. The The guy proposes a full buyout of the wheat under the same values and advantageous terms offered by Armin's competition. Polo explains that despite being the Empire's supply officer, he lacks authority to approve such a high amount on his own. Elric offers, in exchange to truly forgive the past insult, guaranteeing there will be no more grudges between them from now on. The Lord swallows hard and hesitates for a moment under the young protagonist's firm, calculating glare. Desperate, Polo tries to bargain down to 60% of the value, arguing that slashing the price that much would hurt him. He pleads with a very distressed look, hoping to soften the guy's stern heart. Seeing the heir's coldness, Polo quickly ups the offer to 70%, covering all shipping costs and fees. Elric stays firm and counteroffers 75% under the same free freight and tariff terms. The two finally shake hands, sealing the trade deal definitively and successfully for both sides. Elric thanks him for the deal, and the Lord admits the guy was the first to manage to squeeze such a sweet deal out of the Empire. Curious, the noble asks the reason Elric chose to strike a deal with him out of so many possible options. In his thoughts, the protagonist coldly reflects that it was simply because he considered the Lord an extremely easy target to manipulate. Out loud, he brushes it off, saying that despite their bad past, they already knew each other, drawing an awkward laugh from the man. Elric uses the situation to warn he has one last, very important request to make of the Lord. He seriously warns about the danger of any rumor spreading that Kasha was seen in that region after that day. With a terrifyingly dark look, the guy warns that if that happens, their contract will be rewritten in blood. Terrified by the deadly threat, the Lord swallows hard and agrees, nodding his head frantically in fear. The next day, all members of the trade delegation gather at the mansion's large meeting table along with Tyria. Tyria happily announces the decision that the Portman House will officially begin trading with the Imperial Army. Elric observes his wife with a subtle smile on his face while the maids celebrate. Clapping for the achievement, Ugil congratulates fellow delegation member Polo on the successful negotiations, leaving the man quite flustered by the praise. However, Ugil quickly loses his composure and slams the table hard, yelling outraged that all of this is complete nonsense. He stares at Tyria furiously and demands to know if she hasn't heard anything about the decisions of the actual head of the family. Without losing her poise, the young lady calmly replies that everything is happening exactly according to her husband's wishes. Ugil rants, addressing her as young lady and questioning the ridiculous deal, but she coldly corrects him, stating the proper term is wife. The elderly noble widens his eyes, extremely surprised and confused by the young woman's sudden interruption. She proudly introduces herself as Tyria Portman, the lawful wife of the family head who is sitting right beside her. She stares at him with a sharp look, asserting that using the wrong title repeatedly is a serious lack of courtesy toward her. Completely intimidated by the young woman's firmness, the Lord lowers his head in a humbling manner and apologizes for the mistake. Lord Polo can't hold back his laughter given the situation, while Lord Ugil stands beside him looking completely furious. Elric lets out a long sigh. Relieved to finally end that exhausting conversation, Elric orders the coachman to take the guests safely to the station, and the driver promptly accepts the command. Inside the carriage, Lord Polo looks back holding the signed contract. With a surprised expression, Elric watches them leave with a serious, focused look on his face. As the carriage moves further down the dirt road, Elric and Tyria remain standing there, gazing at the horizon. Elric smiles at Tyria and tells her he sees her in a new light now, saying he had no idea she could be so firm. Tyria softly closes her eyes and replies that she simply told that man the truth. She praises her husband's cleverness as head of the house, leaving Elric quite surprised by the unexpected compliment Tyria shows the contract, and explains that the terms he announced were different from the actual document, proving it wasn't a bad deal. He admits that Armin's messenger was far too arrogant and just wanted to hurt his pride, receiving sweet support from his wife. Tyria suggests they finally go inside the mansion, and Elric calmly agrees as they walk side by side. Meanwhile, at the luxurious residence of the EW Group, a large flag with the company's initials sways in the wind. Suddenly, desperate and dramatic screams begin echoing from inside one of the palace halls. Young Duke Edward White comes running into the room in utter desperation, yelling without understanding what's going on. He complains that he offered to buy all of Wibben's wheat for a high price and split the profits, questioning why Elric turned it down. He rants that Elric just needed to follow the plan to make a fortune. While his secretary Agnes tries to calm him down without success, Edward continues his massive temper tantrum, throwing himself around and shouting that Elric ruined all his plans on purpose. In the middle of all that dramatic chaos, the young man loses his balance and his shoe slips on the polished floor. Unable to catch himself, he goes straight backward in an inevitable fall. Luckily, a firm hand quickly appears to catch him before he hits the ground. Edward freezes in surprise as he realizes he was saved from the fall. Just in time, Agnes easily holds her boss in her arms, showing impressive physical strength. She stays steady in the same spot. Holding the startled young man without showing the slightest effort, Agnes firmly calls his attention so he can calm down, and Edward shyly apologizes using her nickname shortly after. An elegantly decorated cup of tea is served to try to soothe Edward's nerves. Agnes asks if he has finally calmed down, and the young man thanks her, feeling much more at ease. Deep in thought, Edward reflects on MC's past as Kasha. Intrigued that he accepted negotiating with the Empire so unexpectedly, Agnes suggests that to figure out someone's true intentions, the best option is simply to ask them directly. He stays quiet for a moment and agrees that talking directly to MC really seems to be the only viable way. With a new idea in mind, Edward stands up, determined to take action regarding the situation. He fixes his eyes on a gorgeous, ornate golden pistol, realizing he will need a great excuse to start the conversation. The scene then shifts to the grand mansion belonging to the influential Elvers Graham family. Sitting in his wheelchair, Lord Graham welcomes Polo, who asks him to take an immediate look at a document. Graham holds the small sealed parchment with great curiosity, wondering what the contents could be. Polo reveals that it is a letter sent directly by MC, leaving the Lord surprised to hear the young man's name. Graham carefully opens the letter sent by MC to read what the young head wrote. He silently analyzes the words, keeping a thoughtful expression given the message's contents. Lord Polo watches his host closely, trying to figure out what his reaction will be to reading it. Suddenly, Graham bursts into an extremely loud and genuine laugh, covering his face from laughing so hard. Graham comments on the shock Polo must have felt running into Kasha again, and the sweating man confesses he almost passed out from fear. The Lord smiles enthusiastically and warmly, thanks Polo for delivering that important letter. Polo takes his leave, saying his duty there is done, and asks them not to worry about seeing him off, receiving safe travels wishes. Left alone, Graham reflects on Kasha's whereabouts and how he ended up in Wibbon, thinking winter must be arriving there too. Meanwhile, on a cold, snow-covered hill, the loud sound of a gunshot echoes, piercing the silence of the region. The barrel of a large hunting rifle appears smoking after firing the bullet toward the target. The shooter cheers happily for hitting the target on the first try. While his hunting companions celebrate the fine shot, they run over to the downed deer, impressed by the size of the animal that will finally guarantee their graduation as hunters. While discussing how they're going to drag the prey back, one of the young hunters freezes upon spotting something shocking in the snow. His companions call for Derek, asking him to bring the horses, but the young man remains completely motionless and terrified. Derek signals for his companions to be quiet, trying to stay calm in the face of imminent danger. He orders them in a low voice to step away from the prey immediately, leaving his friends confused by his sudden change of attitude. Trembling with fear, the young man warns that he feels an unnatural chill and is certain a demonic beast is nearby, begging them to run. The others laugh and tell him to stop messing around, reminding him that it's winter and the cold is normal, insisting he get the horses. Suddenly, a massive rumble echoes and a terrifying presence emerges, while the guys keep telling Derek to calm down without sensing the danger. Terrified, Derek points his weapon toward his friends and screams in desperation for them to get out of the way. As there's something right behind them right then, a monstrous creature leaps toward the group with a terrifying roar, forcing the young men to dive to the ground. It is a terrible demonic beast, a giant wolf with glowing blue eyes and sharp fangs ready to strike far away. The roars of the fearsome creature echo through the icy mountains until they reach the outskirts of the imposing Portman mansion. Inside the mansion, Tyria deeply regrets the terrible incident, unable to believe the report she just heard. The surviving young hunters kneel before her, confessing they fled in sheer terror to save their lives. Tyria tries to reassure them, saying she will discuss the matter with her husband, recommending they rest and have some hot tea. She then instructs housekeeper Rhonda to serve hot food and drinks to comfort the young men after such a big trauma. As the young men take their leave, butler Aldio brings an ancient, heavy book titled Monster Encyclopedia. Aldio walks alongside Tyria, explaining that cross-referencing the young men's accounts with the book's details led them to a conclusion. The experienced butler reveals that the fearsome creature that attacked the hunters appears to be a blade wolf. Tyria grows worried upon hearing about the beast, and Aldio explains these wolves were supposed to have vanished since their alpha leader was slain. The young lady remembers that the alpha wolf was the very reason for the scar on MC's neck, and Aldio confirms it was a dangerous era. Tyria's gaze turns serious and determined as she reflects on the danger this creature poses to everyone. She firmly declares she won't allow the villagers to face the same danger her husband did, deciding to form an extermination squad. Aldio promptly agrees with the order and promises to personally recruit the most skilled elite hunters in the entire territory. Tyria calls the butler one more time before he leaves to begin preparations for the crucial mission. She holds up a finger and specifically asks that they keep this entire plan a complete secret from her husband. Though surprised by the unusual request, Aldio assures her he will keep the secret and handle everything with utmost discretion. In the outer courtyard, the carriage stands ready for MC's trip, with Tyria and the servants gathered to say goodbye. MC bids his wife farewell with a gentle smile, promising to return soon, and she wishes him a safe journey. They watch the carriage depart down the icy road, leaving Tyria deep in thought about the mission she planned behind his back. Aldio asks if they shouldn't give him a warning, fearing the young master might feel hurt or try to resolve things alone despite his injuries. Tyria gazes at the horizon and sadly recalls that was exactly how it happened on a distant day in their past. In her memories, she sees herself crying and desperately screaming MC's name while he ran to face the danger alone. Young MC, armed with nothing but a piece of wood, bravely stood before the giant wolf to save her life. Determined, Tyria states she cannot let her husband walk into danger again and asks if the warriors she requested are ready. The butler points to the heavily armed men, confirming he gathered the best elite hunters in the entire region of Wibben. Tyria walks over, set on resolving everything before her husband returns, but Aldio gasps as he realizes she intends to go with the group. Wearing a heavy coat for the cold, the young noblewoman states that accompanying the men is her duty, as they are risking themselves under her orders. With no choice, Aldio accepts her decision, but imposes the condition that she must fall back immediately if the creature actually shows up. The scene shifts to the center of Wibben, where townspeople walk through snow-covered streets under the freezing winter weather. MC arrives outside the local clinic and observes the wooden sign while thinking about the reason for his medical visit. The elderly doctor examines MC's injured leg with a warm smile, saying his recovery is going great and is nearly complete. MC asks if he can stop using the cane for support, but the doctor advises him to keep using it a bit longer just to be safe. Curious, the doctor asks if the prominent scar on his neck left any lingering effects over the years. Smiling, the young man gently massages his neck and proudly replies that he was treated back then by a very famous professional. The doctor reveals that he was the one who treated him, recalling the desperation of his father, Lord Hoven, begging to save his son's life. MC is completely shocked and surprised to hear that his father desperately begged for his salvation when he was younger. The doctor recalls that dramatic moment, commenting that he had never seen Lord Hoven's face so pale and consumed by the horror of losing his son. MC smiles sadly as he tries to imagine his cold father acting in such a desperate way for his sake. The doctor wraps up the checkup, wishing him well, asking the young man not to engage in any heavy physical exertion over the next few days. The facility's door opens, and the young man gets ready to step back out into the town's cold streets. MC leaves the clinic leaning on his cane, closely accompanied by one of his personal guards. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out his name, asking if the appointment went well, causing him to turn around in surprise. MC recognizes him immediately and mutters Leuten's name. Quite surprised by the unexpected encounter, Leuten breaks into a radiant smile upon confirming his childhood friend really returned to Wibben. Joyfully calling him Captain MC hugs him, thrilled by the surprise. While Leuten explains he hurried over as soon as he received his friend's letter, MC mentions hearing that Leuten joined the Royal Knights, and the young man proudly shows off his new sword. A gift from the royal family, Leuten suggests grabbing drinks to catch up on the old days, promising to cover the bill, and MC accepts, telling him to lead the way. However, a soldier comes running desperately, calling for Leuten to deliver an urgent report, interrupting the warrior's time off. The messenger hands over the document anxiously, revealing it's an emergency distress call sent by House Portman. Both grow completely alarmed by the news of the rescue request, and MC demands to know immediately what is happening to his family. The soldier hesitantly explains that young Tyria Wibben of House Portman is the one in great danger. He reveals she was ambushed by a terrible demonic beast, leaving MC in a total state of shock and terror at the news. Meanwhile, in the snow-covered mountains, the sound of multiple gunshots echoes intensely through the freezing wind. A pack of blade wolves dashes through the frozen forest, pursuing the hunters amidst the blizzard. One of the elite hunters tries to hold off the beasts by repeatedly firing his weapon at the approaching monsters. One shot hits a giant wolf square in the head, and it roars in pain while continuing to run in a frenzy. While the shooters provide covering fire, two guards try to escort Tyria and little Marie to safety along an escape path. Marie points ahead, calling out that she found an abandoned cabin nearby that can serve as temporary shelter. The two hurry up the wooden stairs to get inside quickly and hide from the cold and the wolves. Outside, one of the warriors orders them to ignite the light stone to illuminate the path in the dark storm. He explains that the stone's energy will attract the monsters, deciding to use it as bait to draw the beasts away from there. The risky plan works perfectly, and the whole pack of hungry wolves begins chasing the soldiers deep into the forest. Meanwhile, inside the dark cabin, Tyria and Marie huddle under a heavy blanket, trembling from both cold and terror. Tyria apologizes for putting her friend in danger, but Marie asks her not to blame herself, as she insisted on coming along. Marie tries to comfort her, telling her to hang in there, since help has already been requested and rescue shouldn't take long. Tyria smiles weakly, relieved to have kept the plan secret from MC and to have avoided putting him in danger again. Marie grows emotional over the noblewoman's constant concern for her husband's safety, looking at her with tear-filled eyes. At the same time, MC and Luten ride frantically through the heavy blizzard, trying to reach the rescue location in time. MC wonders anxiously why Tyria decided to take on such a dangerous mission alone, fearing she no longer trusted him. Luyten shouts his friend's name loudly to snap him back to reality amidst that moment of extreme urgency. He asks his companion to stay calm and promises he will save Tyria no matter what, receiving MC's sincere thanks. A quick flashback shows Luyten as a child, running scared and screaming his friend's name in desperation. He recalls when MC sacrificed himself to protect them from that terrible creature in the past. Young Luyten cried, promising to bring help as fast as possible while leaving his friend behind to face the beast. Back in the present, the knight swears to himself that he will never again let his friend fight danger alone. Further ahead in the frozen forest, one of the surviving hunters shouts to signal their presence and guide the knights. Luyten urges his horse forward toward the signal, while MC remains focused on finding his wife's shelter. MC demands to know his wife's whereabouts and condition immediately, and the soldier answers that she took shelter in a nearby cabin and is fine. However, the messenger worryingly reports that his companions ended up trapped while trying to lure the monsters away. MC takes a deep breath in the tense situation and asks to be led to the spot so he can carry out the rescue himself. Luyten places a firm hand on MC's shoulder and stops him from going. Taking control of the situation right then and there, he says he will bring the hunters back and orders MC to go straight to his wife. Ignoring warnings that the beasts are dangerous, Luyten asks his friend to trust him, stating with conviction that he is no longer that cowardly kid from the old days. MC smiles proudly and acknowledges his childhood friend's growth, stating that he is now a true knight. Without wasting time, Luyten orders the soldier to show the location of the endangered companions, setting off quickly to the rescue. Alone in the snow, MC focuses entirely on his own mission, deciding to run as fast as possible to find Tyria. He struggles to run through the relentless blizzard and the freezing wind that lashes the mountain trees. His feet sink deep into the soft snow, making every step a real battle against time and exhaustion. He curses the storm that suddenly worsened, desperately praying that his wife remains safe in the cabin. Finally, after much effort, MC spots the silhouette of the wooden cabin emerging through the icy mist. Driven by urgency, he pushes the door open with all his strength to enter as fast as he can. Desperate, MC calls out his wife's name in the middle of the dark room, hoping she is alive and well inside Tyria, and Marie look up in surprise with wide eyes as they see MC standing inside the cabin, not understanding how he found them. Relieved, MC rushes forward and hugs her tightly, wrapping her in all the warmth and concern that had built up. Still in shock and with flushed cheeks, Tyria stammers, asking why he decided to come to such a dangerous place. He doesn't answer right away, only holding her tighter by the arms to make sure she really is okay there with him. He complains, saying that should be his line, asking why she took such a dangerous risk without talking to him first. Tyria looks away, a bit embarrassed, explaining truthfully that she only wanted to protect him and not put him in danger again. MC looks at her with a sad face and asks if she really thought he was that unreliable. She nervously tries to explain, but is cut short when he suddenly pulls her back into a warm, tight embrace. MC says he is just grateful she is safe, but begs her never to risk herself alone in dangerous situations like that again. With her heart at ease, Tyria rests her head on his shoulder and softly promises she will never do anything like that again. Marie watches the scene from afar with a silly, happy smile, glad to see the couple's reconciliation and relief. Suddenly, heavy, loud footsteps echo from outside the cabin. Immediately catching MC's attention, Marie peeks out the door and cheerfully announces that the hunters have finally returned from the forest covered in snow. MC comments that they acted quite fast and prepares to thank them personally for everyone's excellent work. However, he narrows his eyes as he takes a closer look at the returning group, realizing something is wrong. MC immediately asks where Leuten is, noticing his childhood friend isn't with the men who returned. One of the hunters mournfully shares that Leuten stayed behind alone to delay the beasts and buy time for the rest of the group to escape. MC grinds his teeth in pure frustration and anger, mentally cursing his friend for taking such an impulsive and dangerous risk. He orders the hunters to take Tyria and Marie down the mountain to safety at once, deciding he will personally go save Leuten. Before he can take a step out of the cabin, Tyria's hand firmly grabs him by his suit sleeve. MC turns in surprise to look at his wife, feeling the desperate grip of her hand stopping his immediate departure. With eyes filled with tears, Tyria confesses her huge fear of seeing him hurt and asks him to promise he will return safely to her. He affectionately places his hand over hers, saying he understands her concern, but asks her to trust him fully. MC gives a comforting smile and solemnly promises he will bring Leuten back alive and return without a single scratch. She looks at him with a serious, tearful gaze, warning him that she will truly never forgive him if he breaks that promise and gets hurt. He simply nods with a faint smile, assuring her he will keep those words in his heart during the mission. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the swift paws of the demonic beasts run frantically. Kicking up snow along the path, Leuten bravely fights with his sword against a wolf that leaps toward him with sharp claws and fangs in the middle of the storm. With a quick, precise strike of his blade, the knight slashes the monster in midair in a lethal counterattack. However, the effort takes its toll. Wounded in the eye and covered in blood, the young man can barely breathe from exhaustion. As he looks forward, his desperation grows upon realizing several other giant wolves are approaching for the final strike. With no strength left to fight, Leuten lets out an ironic laugh, admitting he didn't expect to run into so many beasts gathered there. Surrounded by dozens of hungry predators in the snow, he realizes he has lost too much blood and feels his vision starting to go dark. He screams in agony as he accepts his tragic fate, comforting himself with the thought that at least he will pass away in his homeland. He questions the monsters for not striking right away, confessing he doesn't even have the strength to lift his sword from the ground. A giant wolf snarls and bares its sharp fangs, preparing to pounce on the defenseless prey lying before it. With eyes glowing a deadly blue, the monster leaps fiercely toward the wounded Leuten's neck. Leuten closes his eyes, awaiting the final strike that will end his life quickly and painfully in that cold forest. Suddenly, a thunderous shotgun blast hits the beast dead on, sending its lifeless body flying from the devastating impact. Surprised by the noise, Leuten opens his injured eye without understanding what happened, wondering if some hunter decided to come back for him. MC appears holding the still-smoking weapon and pokes fun at his friend's situation. Leaving him completely incredulous to see the captain standing there, MC praises the shotgun's power, though he admits it's not his weapon style, reassuring his friend that Tyria is already completely safe. Next, the young man puts on a serious expression, saying he needs to ask a very difficult favor of his childhood friend right away. MC focuses his eyes directly on the Grand Royal Knight sword Leuten holds firmly in his dirty hands. He points to the weapon and asks if he can borrow the blade for a few moments to resolve the wolf pack situation. Leuten hands over the weapon without a second thought, loyally stating he would give his very life if his childhood friend truly asked. He merely warns that it is an extremely heavy royal sword, completely different from the wooden sticks they used in childhood. To the young man's surprise, MC spins the heavy blade with effortless ease using just one hand, leaving Leuten completely jaw-dropped. MC glances at him out of the corner of his eye and asks if he is still curious about what he did during the 10 years he was away from Wibben. He steps up to face the pack of hungry monsters, promising to show him firsthand all the strength he gained over that time. Several blade wolves roar fiercely in the snow, displaying their sharp fangs. MC channels glowing magic energy into his hand and asks if it's true that blade wolves react sensitively to mana. MC confirms they really do react as the beasts charge furiously toward him with glowing blue eyes. The entire pack advances at once, but MC stands firm, sword in hand and magical energy active. A swift strike cuts through the freezing air, kicking up a huge curtain of snow during the battle. MC dodges masterfully and delivers a precise strike, decapitating one of the wolves as it lets out a yelp of pain. Right after, he eliminates another beast with effortless ease, showing not a hint of struggle. Leuten watches everything from a distance, admitting he has no idea what happened during the 10 years the captain was gone. The knight recalls their childhood, recognizing that the warrior before him is definitely not the little boy he used to know. Surrounded on all sides by hungry monsters, MC prepares to continue the slaughter without hesitation. With an intensely focused gaze, MC executes another lightning-fast slash that glows brightly in the dark. He moves like a true whirlwind across the battlefield, taking the lives of dozens of monsters all at once. He points his sword to the sky and begins gathering a massive amount of blue electrical energy around himself. The energy reaches its peak, generating a bluish flash that engulfs the entire area surrounding the frozen forest. He finishes the devastating attack and lands softly on the snow. While the remains of the defeated beasts scatter across the ground, Leuten is left completely in shock and speechless before that absurd display of power from his childhood friend MC walks calmly toward his ally and asks what he thought of that little display of skill. He wears a friendly smile and asks if that was enough to satisfy his wounded companion's curiosity. Totally exhausted and still unable to believe what he saw, Leuten collapses to a sitting position on the ground and speaks candidly. The knight confesses he is now even more confused by the whole inexplicable situation he just witnessed. Now sheltered inside a large mansion in the snow, MC thanks him for his help, but Leuten replies that he barely did anything with his body wrapped in bandages. The knight states that the captain was the one who handled everything himself. In the end, MC says he couldn't have managed everything alone, and asks if his friend could do him one more special favor. Leuten smiles and replies that he already owes the captain his life twice over, so he doesn't need to ask. Just give the orders. MC asks Leuten to take all the credit for the hunt to avoid drawing attention, leaving the knight completely stunned. MC explains he has personal reasons for it and asks for his friend's help, who hesitates a bit facing the proposal. Leuten grows thoughtful and tense as he realizes the weight of the lie he will have to maintain before his superiors in the kingdom. In the town square, a large crowd gathers to acclaim the knight Leuten as the great hero who saved the Wibben territory. An elderly noble praises Leuten's deeds, impressed that he faced so many demonic beasts completely alone. Embarrassed and awkward with all that attention, Leuten stammers that everything he did was really just the basics. Amidst the crowd, MC watches the scene from afar with a subtle smile, placing a finger over his lips to signal silence. Leuten swallows hard, seeing his friend's signal. Realizing he really will have to carry out that act to the end, he then adopts a firm posture and declares he only drew his blade for the peace of Wibben, filling the kingdom with pride. The noble turns to the enthusiastic crowd, asking everyone to give a standing ovation to the brave knight who protected their land. The people go wild, chanting Leuten's name loudly, fervently celebrating him as the region's great savior. Satisfied with the plan's outcome, MC decides it's the right time for him to turn around and head back home. The scenery changes to the grand, imposing Portman mansion, which is completely blanketed in a thick layer of white snow. A luxurious black carriage drawn by two fine, dark horses slowly approaches the estate's main gate. The carriage wheels turn slowly over the frozen ground until the vehicle comes to a complete stop before the entrance. MC calmly steps down from the transport and is immediately greeted by his dear wife, who was already waiting outside for him. Tyria welcomes the head of the house with a sweet smile, confessing she was starting to get worried about his delay. MC apologizes for being late, explaining he needed extra time to properly say goodbye and thank his friend Leuten. Tyria notices he is walking without support and asks about his leg, making the young man remember the doctor recommended rest. MC lightly pats his own thigh with a playful smile, assuring his wife he already feels fully recovered. He steps a bit closer to Tyria and calls her affectionately, making the young woman's cheeks flush slightly. The young man takes on a protective tone, gently asking her never to put herself in danger alone in the forest again. Shy over her husband's concern, Tyria nods and promises she will always remember that advice from now on. MC suggests they don't stand out there in the cold and go inside, receiving a sweet and affirmative response from his wife. He holds the handle of the large wooden door and pushes it carefully to make way for his beloved into the manor. With great courtesy, MC makes a polite gesture with his free hand, inviting the young lady to enter the residence first. Rhonda watches the two and comments to Marie that it seems spring is already arriving around here, while the young maid giggles, saying it feels more like summer. Tyria tenderly rests her head on her husband's chest and shyly thanks him, calling him the head of the house. Suddenly, the young lady loses her balance and begins to faint, leaving MC completely frantic and shouting for her. He catches her firmly in his arms before she hits the ground, desperately begging his beloved to wake up. An atmosphere of extreme concern washes over Tyria's entire room, while the young lady remains unconscious in her bed. The doctor examines the young lady and sorrowfully tells MC that her health condition is much worse than he imagined. The doctor gravely warns that, unfortunately, she risks suffering a crisis that could prove fatal. looking at MC's distressed face. The doctor remembers that the former leader Hoven wore that exact same look of despair. Distraught, MC tightly grabs the man's shoulder, begging for a solution to save his wife's life. MC begs him to do absolutely everything in his power, as his beloved is the most precious person in his life. The elderly doctor bows before the young lord's despair, solemnly promising he will do his absolute best to help her shortly after. The doctor's carriage speeds down the snowy road to gather more medical supplies. MC watches the carriage depart from the mansion's window, whispering his beloved's name with deep worry. Devastated by the terrible situation, the young man collapses to his knees, drawing the maid's attention and calls for help. Marie gets terrified, but Rhonda tries to soothe MC, saying he needs to keep calm during tough times like this. Later, night falls over the estate, and MC remains alone in his quarters, staring at his untouched plate of food. He stares at the well-prepared meal before him, but his heart is far too heavy to feel any appetite. The young man fondly remembers when his wife kept him company at the table, asking if the food served suited his taste. He vividly recalls the warm, sweet smile she used to give during those simple moments they spent together. MC deeply regrets realizing they barely talked during their entire time married. He bitterly questions himself why he never tried to reach out and talk to his wife more to truly get to know her. Suddenly, he notices something special on the plate of food, letting out a surprised look as he analyzes the ingredients. Outside the room, Rhonda and Marie talk sadly. Noticing the young master didn't touch a single bite of dinner, Rhonda asks Marie to take the tray back while she steps away, leaving the young maid deeply concerned for her master's state. Marie picks up the rejected meal, remembering how the young man usually ate everything with a great appetite every day. She grows quite thoughtful over that sudden change, as his silence and lack of appetite show just how much he is hurting. Rhonda goes to the young master and gently scolds him for barely eating, but he merely apologizes and says he lost his appetite. To try to distract him, the housekeeper suggests he take a walk through the garden his wife used to visit often. The place is filled with gorgeous blue roses that bloom impeccably, brightening the entire surrounding area. MC steps into the garden and asks if that was Tyria's space, hearing from Rhonda that she cared for the flowers with great affection. The young man is surprised to see flowers blooming in the dead of winter, discovering his wife used magic to grow them there. Rhonda comments that the master also loved plants when he was a child, but he replies somberly that it's only a vague memory. Walking beneath the falling petals, MC reflects that his mind is no longer filled with the soft scent of flowers. He is haunted by flashes of his violent war past. Remembering only the terrible stench of destruction, Rhonda continues talking, revealing the late lady always said her big childhood dream was to become an incredible doctor. MC is quite surprised by the revelation, finding it unusual for a young woman from a noble family to pursue that path. An old memory flashes through the young man's mind, showing the moment someone handed over a small pouch of medicinal herbs. Rhonda notices his silence and asks if everything is all right, to which he replies he just remembered something very important from the past. Concerned for her master's health, the housekeeper suggests they head back inside due to the cold, and he agrees. The day comes to an end at Portman Manor while the sky takes on a warm, melancholic late-afternoon glow inside the residence. Butler Aldio turns in surprise, asking what brings the young lord to that wing of the mansion. MC finds the old man's presence strange and asks why he is working alone in Tyria's personal office. Aldio shows the desk piled high with paperwork, explaining that having served the former leader for half his life, he knows how to manage it all. Upset, MC confronts the butler, saying he should have helped the young lady more to keep her from falling ill from exhaustion. Maintaining his composure, Aldio respectfully replies that he was merely following the lady's explicit orders. The young man tries to fix things by asking if he can help with the tasks, but the old man coldly declines, saying he prefers working alone. Feeling guilty, MC mentions he will ask Rhonda to bring him some tea, leaving the office as the butler thanks him. Shortly after, young Marie walks hurriedly down the mansion's hallway, pushing a lovely cart with teapots and teacups. She knocks softly on MC's door, announcing she prepared a hot drink, and he responds from inside. Allowing her to enter, Marie steps into the quiet room and sadly watches her master sitting on the couch with a thoroughly gloomy expression. Marie holds the tray with hot tea, looking at the young lord with eyes full of concern. She begins pouring the drink into the delicate cup, letting the gentle aroma fill the quiet room. Marie explains she made the rose tea the young lady likes best. Kindly asking the master to drink a little, MC fixes his eyes on the cup, watching the floating petal, and softly answers that he appreciates the maid's thoughtfulness. The girl tries to cheer him up, genuinely assuring him that the mistress is strong and will be back in good health soon. MC lets out a tired sigh and apologizes for making the maids worry so unnecessarily about him. Marie panics right away and curtsies awkwardly, explaining she only acted that way because he looked so down. She takes her leave, saying she will head out so as not to bother him further, carefully closing the door as she exits. Alone again, MC leans forward on the couch, thoughtfully whispering his beloved's name while staring at the steaming cup. Looking at the night sky through the window, he silently prays she recovers and returns safely to him. The scene shifts to Wibben's local clinic, standing out under the full moon's bright light in the middle of the freezing night. In one of the rooms, a nurse notes down the clinical status of Tyria, who remains bedridden, breathing with great difficulty. Even terribly weak and sweating with fever, the young lady opens her eyes slightly, thinking she can't go on like this. A tear slips down her face as she realizes her husband will be extremely worried about her sudden absence. The nurse notices the patient's distress, asking with a sweet look if she is feeling okay at that moment. Delirious from the high fever, Tyria hears distant voices calling her name over and over in her mind. In her memories, a carriage speeds through the snow under a clear, sunny sky from the past. Young Tyria steps down from the transport with a bright smile, asking the servants if everything went well while she was away. Marie and Rhonda run happily toward her, enthusiastically celebrating their dear mistress's return to the estate. Marie hugs her mistress, crying with relief, while Tyria lets out a warm laugh, assuring her she is in perfect health. Rhonda bows respectfully and celebrates her mistress's recovery, then invites her into the warm mansion. With flushed cheeks and eyes sparkling with anticipation, the blonde wonders how the head of the house has been doing these past few days. Suddenly, MC comes running frantically down the hallway, shouting to know if his wife really returned safely. Seeing her husband out of breath, Tyria's heart races with emotion, while the young man looks at her in surprise, catching his breath. Unable to contain his relief, MC shouts her name and runs with all his strength toward his beloved wife. However, the young man loses his footing halfway, startling the women who try to stop his fall. Ignoring the near spill, MC simply throws himself into Tyria's arms, wrapping her in an extremely tight, warm hug. With eyes full of relief tears, he apologizes for acting on impulse, but begs to hold her like that just for a moment. Time passes, and the cold, starry night wraps around the grand manor, bringing a cozy silence to the entire Wibben territory. In her quarters, Tyria rolls from side to side in bed, hugging her pillow, gushingly repeating her husband's title. She lets out a giddy laugh and squeezes the pillow even tighter, completely radiant and overjoyed by his romantic gesture. The blonde recalls that exact moment of MC's tight embrace, feeling her heart race again at the sudden memory. She kicks her legs in the air from sheer embarrassment, confessing to herself she thought her chest would simply explode with emotion. Suddenly, Marie opens the bedroom door all at once, holding a tray, cheerfully announcing she brought her some tea. Tyria gets startled by the maid's sudden entry, quickly trying to compose herself in bed, turning bright red. Trying to hide her overwhelming shyness, the young lady regains her elegant posture and invites the girl inside. Marie smiles ear to ear and enthusiastically responds before walking toward the table to serve the hot drink. Marie is amazed to learn the two met in childhood, though Tyria sadly admits her husband doesn't remember a thing. Eyes sparkling with youthful curiosity, the maid excitedly asks about the exact moment they saw each other for the first time. Tyria holds her cup and fondly recalls the young man was extremely brave, proposing marriage right on their very first meeting. Marie's jaw drops at the young master's boldness, but Tyria laughs, remembering he jumped to conclusions and ran off without hearing her answer. Tyria continues her story, sharing that fate brought them together again that same autumn, right there at Portman Manor. She explains this special reunion happened on the very day her father and the former head of the Portman family scheduled a meeting. A past scene shows a hand firmly holding a heavy wooden rod used to deliver physical disciplinary punishment. Little Tyria holds out her trembling hands with tears in, her eyes forced to take severe physical punishment without defending herself. A noblewoman with an icy glare raises the wooden rod high in the air, ready to strike a painful blow on the child. The maid tries to intervene in desperation, warning they are at Portman Manor and someone might see, but the cruel mother tells her to shut her mouth. The noblewoman looks down at her frightened daughter, warning her in a cold voice that she will say this only once more. She states that Tyria's marriage will decide their family's fate and that a union with the Nimrods would be the perfect opportunity for them. The mother finishes with a terrible threat, saying if the girl complains once more, she will go without food for 2 full days. Firm footsteps echo through Portman Manor's quiet hallway in the past as the library door opens. The maid comforts little Tyria, saying she knows how much it hurts and asking her to wait there while she gets medicine. The woman hurries down the hallway's red carpet, leaving the frightened girl completely alone in the middle of the room. Tyria stands clutching her bruised hands in sadness until she hears a faint noise coming from behind the bookshelves. Crying softly, she wonders through her tears why she must marry a man whose face she doesn't even know. Suddenly, a heavy book falls from one of the shelves, making a loud noise that startles the girl and makes her jump. Little MC appears crouched, trying to pick up the book he dropped, looking at the girl in total surprise. Awkward in the unexpected situation, the little boy waves his hand and greets her warmly, saying they met again. Tyria stammers, asking what he is doing there, and MC explains he lives there as the son of the house, telling her she can speak normally. Intrigued by the girl's tears, the little boy curiously asks who she is supposed to marry. She sadly looks away and explains it isn't by choice, but rather an obligation to help her family. MC looks at her thoughtfully for a few moments, directly asking if she would like him to help her escape that. He gestures for her to follow him, firmly promising he will figure out a way so she isn't forced to marry anyone. The little girl is fascinated by the boy's heroic attitude. Feeling her cheeks warm up quickly from shyness, Marie squeals in excitement upon hearing about the master's cute side in childhood, while Tyria asks if she knows where he took her. Marie's eyes widen with anticipation, asking eagerly where the young master took her on that unforgettable day. The scene returns to the past, showing MC's childhood friends marveling at something beautiful they saw in the field. MC proudly points to himself, asking his friends if he hadn't told the truth. While Tyria holds her umbrella, one of the boys asks if she was the one who rejected him, making MC yell angrily that he just didn't get an answer, but the other laughs back. Annoyed by his friends' teasing, MC complains angrily at them while Tyria just lets out a cheerful, amused laugh. He shouts, red with embarrassment, saying it was all part of a master plan to recruit such a pretty doctor for their crew. The two friends nod in sync, laughing and agreeing they had never seen a doctor as pretty as her before. Excited by the answer, MC declares the start of the crew's daily patrol and gives the order to march, followed by cheerful shouts. In a quieter moment, the two stand side by side in that beautiful green field under a comfortable silence. MC seriously explains to her that according to the kingdom's military laws, a soldier belongs to the army until discharged. He adds that since she is now officially his crew's doctor, she no longer needs to be forced to marry anyone. Embarrassed, the little boy asks if she would give her final answer when he finally becomes a royal knight. Marie gets super excited by the romance, commenting that the young master clearly had no intention of giving up on her. Tyria smiles sweetly and agrees, explaining his friends returned right after, so she couldn't give her answer. She recalls that despite everything, the two spent the rest of that unforgettable day running and playing together in the green fields. The boys ran around shouting to capture a cute squirrel, pretending the creature was a terrible beast threatening their village. They chased the small animal with loud laughter, while the squirrel fled desperately through the forest's low brush. Watching all that playful fun, the little girl realized for the first time in her life how happy a single day of fun could be. MC points ahead with excitement, showing his new doctor the spot he called their crew's secret hideout. Tyria looks in wonder at the small rustic wooden cabin, confessing she had never seen a structure like that before. MC smiles proudly, promising that when he becomes a real royal knight, he will build a large training center right there. The other boys run past MC, shouting that they will enter the hideout first to set up the space. The boy then unexpectedly holds out a closed cloth pouch toward her, politely asking her to take it. The boy carefully places the pouch in the young girl's delicate hands, and she holds the gift with curiosity and surprise at his gesture. Looking intrigued at the small pouch in her trembling hands, the girl softly asks what's inside. MC awkwardly explains that a doctor needs to know how to identify medicinal plants, shyly suggesting she try planting them later. Marie is enchanted by the romantic story, asking if those seeds in the pouch were the same ones she planted in her garden. Tyria smiles with eyes full of tenderness, confirming those lovely blue flowers in the garden were the fruit of that day's gift. Marie lets out a dreamy sigh, excitedly commenting on how the current head of the house was always such a romantic, thoughtful boy with her. However, their relaxed moment is interrupted by firm, polite knocks on Tyria's wooden bedroom door. Rhonda calls from outside, suspecting Marie is in there, commenting the girl has spent far too long chatting in the room. The housekeeper enters with a scolding look, demanding explanations from Marie, who shrinks back embarrassed. Apologizing for the mistake, Tyria lets out a gentle laugh to smooth things over, taking the blame, explaining to Rhonda that she was the one who kept the young girl chatting. Rhonda adopts a stern yet caring tone, reminding her mistress she needs complete rest, firmly ordering her to go to sleep. With no way out facing the housekeeper's affectionate scolding, the young lady lies down and pulls the blanket over her face, wearing a thoughtful, cute look. Rhonda bows respectfully, wishing Tyria a peaceful night, and she warmly bids her housekeeper good night. Silence and peace finally return to the estate as the night progresses under the starry sky. Tyria falls deeply asleep in her warm bed, drifting into a light slumber filled with comforting memories of the past. In her dreams, the image of the small wooden cabin appears, glowing under the bright light of a lovely, sunny day from childhood. The 4 children appear lying side by side on the wooden porch, sleeping peacefully after a whole day of fun. Little Tyria slowly opens her eyes, looking at MC's face as he sleeps soundly and serenely beside her. With great affection, she strokes the boy's hair, mentally thanking him for giving her the most fun day of her life. She wears a sweet, determined smile, deciding in her heart that she had finally made a big, important life decision. The little girl gives MC a tender kiss on the cheek, promising herself she will truly become his wife in the future. Day breaks brightly, and the sound of birds singing brings a light, fresh atmosphere to the grand Portman Manor. Tyria wakes up feeling much better, sitting on the edge of the bed, slowly stretching with a calm, refreshed look. Still wearing her white nightgown, the young lady walks calmly toward her room's door to head out. Upon opening the door, she gets a huge start as she comes face to face with her husband, who was already standing outside waiting for her. MC leans against the wall with a relaxed smile, wishing his wife a good morning, while she stares at him, quite confused. Cheeks slightly flushed, he shyly asks if she would like to join him for morning tea. Tyria happily accepts the invitation, but mentions she isn't dressed properly yet, asking him to wait just a few minutes. The young man laughs awkwardly and readily agrees, saying she can take her time getting ready while he waits right there. Before closing the door, Tyria catches his attention again, saying she has an important question she'd like to ask, flushed and shy. The young lady sweetly asks if he would start calling her wife instead of my lady from now on. Caught off guard by the romantic request, MC scratches his head awkwardly, feeling his face burn with embarrassment. He wears a gentle smile, instantly accepting the sweet request, saying he will wait for morning tea with his dear wife, radiant and happy with the answer. Tyria gives a huge smile, cheerfully agreeing with her husband before closing the door. Shortly after, 2 steaming cups of tea are served on the main hall's decorated table for the couple's time together. MC asks if his wife usually reads the newspaper, and she confirms, explaining she needs to keep up with world news due to wheat exports. Tyria shows a worrying news article about Chaebor's surrender to the Western Empire, leaving MC completely surprised and tense. MC reflects silently that it was the very nation where he worked as a mercenary. Becoming extremely curious about the details, he suddenly leans in and pulls the paper, enthusiastically suggesting they read the article together to understand what happened better. As his eyes focus on the headline about Chaebor's fall, the young man adopts a serious, thoughtful look at the tragic fate of the place. However, the sudden physical proximity makes Tyria's heart race, her cheeks turning bright red. MC quickly pulls back awkwardly, apologizing for getting so close, while she tries to hide her shyness, saying it's fine. An awkward, sweet silence takes over the room, with both avoiding direct eye contact as they try to manage their embarrassment. The young man tries to regain his composure, focusing back on his thoughts regarding the political events he just read in the paper. Tyria sneaks a loving glance at him, still a bit shy from the physical closeness they just shared. She lets out a subtle, gentle smile, realizing their relationship was finally growing closer and more intimate. Feeling confident, the young lady slowly closes her eyes, leaning softly toward her beloved husband's face. Tyria plants an incredibly tender kiss on MC's cheek, leaving him standing completely still, surprised by her bold move. Suddenly, Marie bursts into the hall shouting, holding a letter, excitedly announcing the arrival of the invitation to the royal banquet. Embarrassed by the interruption, Tyria hides behind the newspaper, while MC spits out his tea in shock at the maid's loud entry. Marie stops in the middle of the hall, holding the envelope sealed with red wax, staring at her master and mistress without understanding the commotion. The bright, sunny day highlights the architectural beauty of Portman Manor, set amid Wibbon's lush green lands. Later, the couple walks arm in arm through the residence's luxurious hallways while discussing the royal event invitation. MC analyzes the official document in his hands, commenting with an ironic smile that he never imagined receiving an invitation to the palace. Tyria explains his family inherited the noble title from hers, but the young man regrets the situation, offering a sincere apology for what happened. MC looks away guiltily, admitting that due to his late father's greed, they used her family to force this marriage. Tyria adopts a very serious, resolute expression, interrupting her husband to reveal something important she had never told him. Caught totally off guard by his companion's solemn tone, MC looks at her, confused, curiously waiting for what she will say. Tyria firmly declares everything was of her own free will and that the marriage was in no way unwanted on her part. MC asks in surprise if that means she truly wanted to marry him, leaving the blonde blushing completely at the question. To escape the embarrassing topic, she hurriedly orders him to get ready for the trip, as the carriage will take days to reach the palace. MC calls her back with a smile, playfully asking if she was really planning on traveling by carriage the whole way. Tyria looks back, quite surprised, asking how else they could possibly travel to the royal palace. The scene shifts to the Grand Wibbon Station, a massive, modern railway facility in the region. The couple waits on the platform while a large cloud of white steam begins rising from the metal tracks. Tyria stammers in awe, seeing the giant train arrive, while a passenger nearby gets surprised that it's her first time there. Awkward over the stranger's comment, the blonde softly replies she always traveled using regular carriages. MC smiles, assuring her she will be amazed by the trip, which will take only a few hours instead of several days by carriage. He extends his hand, inviting her to board the train, receiving a shy, affirmative response from his beloved wife. Inside the train car, an attendant approaches with concern, politely asking if everything is all right with them. Tyria appears clinging to her husband, trembling with fear, while MC explains with a smile that it's just her first train ride. MC wraps his protective arms around her with tenderness, asking her not to be afraid, as he will be by her side the entire time. The locomotive's smokestack releases a strong blast of black smoke into the air as the train finally starts moving along the tracks. Tyria panics completely, eyes wide with fright as she feels the initial vibration and rumble of the massive vehicle. Desperate, she begs to go back to the carriage because of the noise, but her husband laughs, explaining it's just the sound of the steam. The locomotive speeds ahead. Slicing through vast, snow-covered plains beneath the bright blue sky, MC gently catches his wife's attention, asking her to look through the window glass for a moment. He delicately pulls the curtain, allowing bright, intense sunlight to flood the cozy luxury car. The blonde is mesmerized by what she sees. While MC watches her from behind with a proud smile, the window displays a spectacular landscape of snow-capped mountains that seem to fly past her amazed eyes. Fascinated by the speed and beauty of the scenery, the young lady lets out an exclamation of pure joy, clasping her hands in excitement. MC affectionately asks what she thought of the experience, asking if the view isn't far superior to a slow carriage ride. Tyria turns to him with a radiant smile, fully agreeing with a nod, admitting the journey is truly magical. The peaceful moment is interrupted when the train attendant catches MC's attention in a serious, formal manner. The man asks if he is Lord Elric Portman, handing over a mysterious small blue box, mentioning it came from a first-class cabin. MC takes the small velvet case and opens it carefully, revealing a solid gold bullet glowing inside. With a serious look, the hero recognizes the bullet that injured his knee in the past. Realizing his enemy is aboard that very train, he analyzes the metal closely, noticing the number 103 engraved on it, deducing that must be the room of the person behind the threat. He observes his distracted wife, deciding he needs to resolve this quickly and quietly to spare her from any unnecessary danger. Calmly, so as not to raise suspicion, MC gently asks her to wait a moment in the cabin, and she accepts without mistrusting anything. The young man closes the train car door, walking ahead with firm, resolute steps down the narrow hallway, fully focused on his current mission. Shortly after, he finally arrives outside the special first-class cabin bearing the number 103. Maintaining a serious expression and tense posture, MC stares at the cabin door handle, mentally preparing for the imminent confrontation. He holds the golden metal handle and slowly pushes the door, making the latch open with a soft creak in the car. Inside the luxurious train car, Duke Edward and his bodyguard Agnes calmly await MC's arrival, receiving him with mockery. The young Duke greets the newcomer informally and tauntingly, calling him by his old war code name, Kasha. With a sarcastic smile, Edward mockingly asks if he should formally address him by his noble title from now on. In a split second, MC reacts, pulling his sharp dagger from his waist with extreme speed and precision to defend against the threat. Without a moment's hesitation, MC lunges fiercely toward the Duke, weapon in hand, to deliver a lethal blow. However, Agnes reacts in the same millisecond, drawing her black revolver and pointing it straight at the hero to stop him. MC stops his attack inches from Edward's neck, while his red eyes glow menacingly in the face of imminent danger. With an even faster movement, MC manages to place the blade of his dagger right against Agnes's throat, neutralizing her. Despite having a knife at her neck, the bodyguard stands firm, pointing the revolver straight at MC's chest. The two warriors freeze in a deadly standoff inside the cabin, their weapons aimed directly at each other's vital areas. Both glare at each other coldly and strategically, knowing any false move from either party will result in immediate death right there. Terrified by the deadly standoff that formed in his car, the young Duke begins screaming desperately for both of them to stop. Edward orders the girl to lower her weapon, asking for respect toward the legendary sword demon, recognized as one of the 7 strongest in the entire continent. He also asks MC to move the knife away from the girl, politely explaining that his dear secretary's aim is flawless and lethal. The Duke warns that even if MC cuts her neck, the girl would be capable of emptying her revolver into him before taking her final breath. MC maintains the cold, calculating look of a mercenary, assessing the young noble's words without making any physical movement. Seeing the logic in the situation, MC slowly retracts his blade, causing the bodyguard to lower her revolver with equal care. A memory from the past flashes in MC's mind, showing the exact moment the terrifying sniper fired at him with extreme coldness and precision. MC recalls the moment he was wounded in the face during a tense combat. In the past, MC agrees with what the young Duke said about the danger of the situation. Agnes gets quite annoyed by the order, but reluctantly lowers her weapon. MC calmly comments that it would just be a pointless fight for both sides. The bodyguard silently passes MC, stepping away with firm strides. Edward praises his smart choice, letting him know he will give him 30 minutes of time. MC demands the young man explain right away why he summoned him within that time limit. The steam train moves swiftly along the tracks amidst the vast, cold landscape. Edward says straight out that it is time for the legendary Kasha to officially retire from the battlefield. MC asks if he was called just to hear that, but the Duke says rumors of disappearance aren't enough. The young noble makes it clear he wants to see MC officially announce his retirement. MC stays silent for a few moments, merely staring at the young man with seriousness. MC explains that would be difficult because he ended up making far too many enemies in the past. He argues that everyone would know his location if he appeared in public, and he doesn't want to take that risk. Suddenly, Edward gets all excited, suggesting they sign a mercenary contract without thinking twice. MC turns down the offer directly, and bluntly Edward lets out a groan of frustration at being rejected so quickly by the warrior. The young man then asks what the Western Front really represented to the hero. The Duke explains that to him, war is a massive, profitable business for his commercial group. He adds that all the movement on the front lines simply represents money flowing, with total indifference. MC asks what all that has to do with him exactly. Edward reveals he had absolute control over the entire war, except for one single detail. He points out that everything changed when the feared sword demon decided to show up on the map. The young man states that MC is the biggest risk variable to his profitable business deals. The Duke then offers 2 options. Either the hero officially retires, or he joins him for good. MC crosses his arms, maintaining a firm stance without saying a word for now. He rejects both options but promises he will never set foot on the Western Front again. The hero adds that he would also prefer the young man never appear before him again. MC turns to leave, letting him know he is taking his leave right now. Edward warns in a serious tone that the warrior had better keep the word he just gave. Edward says he is as serious about his business as the hero is about his wife. MC gives a faint smirk, calmly stating he will remember that very well. The Duke says to make sure neither of them ends up paying a heavy price in the future. The car door slams shut with extreme force, echoing a thunderous noise through the hallway. Edward lets out a soft sigh, deciding to call his bodyguard by her nickname. Aggie, the young man asks, extremely tense and breaking into a cold sweat if she happened to bring a spare pair of undergarments. Meanwhile, in another location, the grand mansion of the Nimrud family stands out on the horizon. Someone in a white glove lightly knocks on the heavy wooden door twice. The butler calls for young Master Aman, who desperately shouts from inside, asking for a second. Aman cracks the door open, casually asking what the butler wants with him. The servant reports he was just returning after delivering the tailcoat design to the tailor. A young maid with disheveled clothes pops up right behind him, apologizing, extremely embarrassed. The butler reminds him of Dalton's warning not to mess with the maids, but the young man scoffs at the rule. Aman changes the subject, eagerly asking if Tyria Wibben Portman will be attending this year's banquet. The young man gets very excited, ordering them to prepare a special strong wine to welcome the lady. He fantasizes out loud that he will win her over as soon as she lowers her guard in his arms. The old man ruins the young man's fantasy by sharing that her husband, Elric Portman, returned months ago. Annoyed by MC's 10-year absence, he can't understand how the man had the audacity to return. A man points his finger furiously, ordering the servant to find out MC's whereabouts immediately. He concludes he needs to find his rival in person, and the butler readily accepts the order. Aman gets thoughtful, telling himself that MC will soon realize he doesn't deserve Tyria at all. At the main Portman mansion, Tyria comments to her husband that it has been a long time since his last visit to the place. MC agrees, saying even in his childhood he used to spend much more time in Wibben. Tyria agrees with her husband, suggesting they head inside, which he readily accepts. Night falls quickly over the massive grand mansion of the prominent Portman family. Inside, a beautiful painting hangs showing MC's father and mother looking very elegant. Tyria asks what he is doing, and MC confesses he had never seen that painting of his parents before. The young lady explains she found the portrait in storage and decided to hang it up after getting proper permission from her father-in-law. MC is quite surprised his father allowed that, but his wife reveals he ended up accepting in the end. The hero thinks his father wouldn't even let the topic be brought up in the past, leaving him reflective. Tyria shares, blushing deeply, that her father-in-law gave them his own room, saying a married couple should have the largest room. The hero feels extremely awkward, apologizing for his father's unnecessary comment. He notices it's getting late, suggesting his wife rest, prompting the young lady to ask where he plans to sleep. He tries to reassure her with a smile, saying he will sleep in his old room so she can rest in peace. Tyria merely lets out a soft sigh, accepting his decision somewhat awkwardly. The young lady wishes her husband a good night as she slowly walks away down the mansion's hallway. Lying face down on the master bed, Tyria mentally berates herself for being so suddenly shy. She remembers how bold she used to be and can't understand why she is being so timid now. In her mind, she begins fantasizing about her husband entering the room with a bright smile, asking her to sleep together. She imagines herself replying confidently that there's nothing strange about a married couple sharing a bed. Tyria kicks around in bed out of sheer embarrassment, thinking her husband should have been the one to take the initiative. Suddenly, a terrible sound of wood breaking echoes directly from MC's room. Startled by the sudden crash, she jumps up quickly, worried about what happened to him. The maids come running, showing that MC's bed completely collapsed out of nowhere. The hero apologizes with an awkward laugh, suggesting he sleep on the couch, but his wife immediately cuts him off. Completely embarrassed and bright red, Tyria proposes they share the same room that night. Night falls silently over the Portman family mansion, while quiet footsteps echo outside in the dark hallway. Family portraits observe the silence as someone slowly opens one of the doors. Suddenly, young maid Marie sneaks into MC's room, revealing her true intentions. With a determined look and without hesitating for a second, she holds a handsaw firmly in her hands. Marie thinks everything she's about to do is purely for the future of the Portman family. Standing before the young master's portrait, she decides she will saw through one side of the bed first, then the other. After finishing her secret work, Marie closes the bedroom door, letting out a sigh of relief.
Thinking everything turned out perfect. Suddenly, MC appears in the hallway, praising her good work that day, catching her off guard. Marie wishes her lord a good night, and MC simply smiles, telling her to sleep well too. As soon as the young man steps away down the hall, the maid closes the wooden door with a plan in mind. With a mischievous smile, she wonders if she should stir things up, while a loud crash echoes inside. In the master bedroom, MC and Tyria lie back to back.
Unable to relax, MC feels incredibly tense, unable to sleep, while Tyria desperately wonders what she should do. The young lady can't believe they ended up in the same bed, panicking over the situation. She closes her eyes, bright red, feeling she won't be able to stay sane if she remains there. Heart racing, MC decides to turn slightly, whispering to ask if she is already asleep, but Tyria had already fallen asleep quickly. Overcome by the accumulated exhaustion of the past few days, he lets out a relieved sigh and looks at her sleeping face, finding the sight extremely cute. Being very careful not to wake her, the hero reaches out and brushes the strands of hair away from her face. He affectionately strokes his wife's head, thinking she must have been truly exhausted. Suddenly, Tyria turns in bed and grabs his shirt tightly, leaving the young man in shock, desperate and blushing. He softly begs his wife to open her eyes and let him go, but she only holds him tighter while murmuring her husband's name, dreaming she is hugging a pillow. MC starts breaking into a cold sweat, trying to calm down, knowing it would be a total disaster if she woke up right now. He imagines the young lady shouting furiously at him for breaking their agreement, while he nervously tries to explain, shaking his head to brush away those thoughts. The hero repeats to himself that he needs to stay in control. But Tyria hugs him even tighter in bed, making the poor guy beg her to stop doing that. Day finally breaks at the mansion, and MC groans tiredly after staying up the entire night. Tyria slowly opens her eyes with the sunlight, letting out a confused grumble as she wakes up. She gets a huge shock upon realizing she spent the whole night clinging to her husband's chest. Completely embarrassed, she wonders how she ended up in her lord's arms like that. Tyria starts wondering if MC tossed and turned in his sleep and ended up pulling her close. Thinking it was all due to his sleeping habits, she decides to snuggle a bit more into his arms. Right in the middle of this romantic moment, the farm rooster starts crowing loudly outside. Startled by the sudden noise, MC jumps up, his face turning bright red. The young man quickly moves back on the bed, stammering to ask if his wife is fully awake. Sighing in relief, he thinks it was a very close call. Avoiding an embarrassing situation, hidden under the covers, Tyria gets extremely annoyed at having her moment ruined. MC finally gets up and leaves the room, leaving his wife alone in the master bed. Lying in the room illuminated by the morning sun, Tyria silently dwells on her frustration. She squeezes her eyes shut in anger, lamenting that the rooster crowed right when she wanted to stay cuddled up. With fists clenched in pure rage, the young lady mentally swears she will put an end to that stupid rooster. At lunchtime, a whole golden roast chicken is served directly at their table. MC looks at the dish, quite confused, awkwardly asking what that meal is supposed to mean. Tyria says he seemed low on energy lately, so she prepared that specially for him. She covers it up with a smile, asking if he already has a design in mind for his new suit. He says he doesn't know much about etiquette, suggesting they discuss the details with the estate's housekeeper. Shortly after, the family carriage heads toward the bustling capital of the Kingdom of Ferdin. The luxurious vehicle crosses the big city's cobblestone streets, taking the couple to their appointments. The housekeeper mentions she will take the couple to the tailor, ordering Marie to go with the butler to buy a new bed. Marie gives an enthusiastic military salute as she sits in the carriage beside the butler. Rhonda guides the couple through the cobblestone streets, letting them know she will accompany them to the famous tailor shop. MC smiles and agrees, asking Rhonda to lead the way, closely followed by his wife Soon. The three arrive outside the grand storefront of Madame Selina's famous tailor shop. Rhonda enters the establishment and calls for the owner, while Tyria waits right behind. An extravagant blonde woman comes running over, shouting excitedly that it has been a long time since she last saw her. She hugs the housekeeper tightly and welcomes them, asking if they came to check out the new coats. Tyria steps forward with a gentle smile, explaining that today's business is actually something else. The owner quickly apologizes for not greeting the noblewoman earlier, and Tyria says it's good to see her again. Rhonda explains they came to order a special suit for the new lord of the house. MC politely introduces himself with a smile, saying it's a pleasure to meet the shop owner. Madame Selena covers her mouth in total shock upon hearing the young man's name. She bows deeply, apologizing for failing to recognize the new lord of House Portman, but a cold voice emerges from the shadows, reminding everyone that the young man hasn't officially received the title yet. Rhonda and Selena turn around, startled by the sudden intrusion of an unknown figure. Tyria also turns quickly, eyes wide, surprised to recognize who is standing there. The man walks calmly, commenting he hadn't heard of any succession ceremony since his father's death. He leans close to MC's ear, mockingly asking if he doesn't agree with what was said. MC doesn't let the taunts shake him, merely wearing a calm, enigmatic smile. The hero asks if his rival is attending the banquet specifically to introduce himself and address that. The man ignores the question, lets out a condescending laugh, and boldly calls Tyria by her name. Tyria stares at him with folded arms and a serious expression while he complains about her not greeting him. He suggests she tell her husband about the relationship the two supposedly share with a malicious look. He claims the laws of the Kingdom of Ferdin are on his side in this situation. MC listens in silence with a focused expression, analyzing the arrogant man's boldness. With a malicious smile, he asserts that under the law, the two are practically already married. A tense atmosphere dominates the sophisticated tailor shop's interior as the men glare at each other. Tyria stands shocked, stammering, unable to believe the audacity of that man's words. MC fires back, stating he knows an unconsummated marriage within 10 days can be legally annulled. He reveals he ran away on their wedding day specifically because he wanted that union canceled. The hero adds that things would be simple if his rival weren't ignoring an exception clause. MC smiles, explaining that the wishes of either spouse take priority according to the rules. He looks at his wife, stating out loud that Tyria faithfully waited for him for 10 long years. The hero concludes by saying even an idiot could understand her intentions by now. Aman flies into a rage at being called an idiot, glaring at the young man with pure hatred in his eyes. He tries to mask his anger with a cynical smile, commenting that the hero sounded quite unhappy speaking. Ignoring his rival, MC turns to the shop owner, calmly calling her by name. He asks if she could recommend a pastry shop for his wife, and the owner awkwardly agrees. The young man invites his wife to go ahead with the owner while asking for tea to be served to the lords. MC turns to his arrogant rival, suggesting they have a frank, private conversation. Amen dismissively accepts, saying he wants to hear what a merchant's son has to say. Hot tea is served on the table, setting the scene for the tense conversation ahead. Sitting face to face on comfortable couches, the two men stare at each other in a heavy silence. A man leans back comfortably, arrogantly asking what MC really wants to say. MC gets straight to the point coldly, demanding his rival immediately stop coveting his wife. A man scoffs at the term, asking if he thinks he has any right after abandoning the girl right after the wedding. He brazenly claims he has been courting Tyria ever since the hero left. Amen says he is far more worthy of being her husband than someone who irresponsibly abandoned her. The man concludes dismissively that MC simply doesn't deserve a woman like her. With a cynical smile on his face, he hints that their story is far from over. Amen raises his hands, laughing mockingly, saying, since the couple seems so in love, he agrees to step aside. However, he holds up a finger, indicating he will only do so under one condition, leaving the hero suspicious, with a creepy, disturbing smile. The rival demands that MC let him spend just a single night with Tyria. That very instant, MC kicks the coffee table with all his strength, completely shattering the tea set. Aman gets thrown backward by the sudden impact, screaming in fear at the hero's violent reaction. Without giving his rival a second to breathe, MC swiftly lunges forward, landing a devastating punch right on his face. The punch is so hard that the arrogant man flies back, crashing violently onto the tailor shop floor. Outside the private room, Rhonda and the other employees turn in terror upon hearing the loud crash. With an entirely cold look, MC tosses his coat aside and walks slowly toward his fallen enemy. Bleeding heavily, Amen tries to threaten him, asking if he knows who he's messing with, but MC grabs him by the collar. Fist raised, filled with rage, the hero furiously shouts that he doesn't give a damn who he is. Rhonda bursts through the door, screaming in panic, begging her lord to stop right away. Ignoring the plea, MC delivers another brutal punch to Amen, smashing the floor and sending wood splinters flying. The hero says he tolerates insults directed at himself and his origins, but things change if he dares insult Tyria again. Eyes glowing red, MC delivers a dark threat that his death will be excruciatingly painful if he persists. Completely terrified and beaten up, the cowardly man begins to tremble, desperately apologizing for his mistake. Meanwhile, at a luxury furniture store, butler Aldio and young maid Marie look for the shop owner. The merchant appears rubbing his hands together, all smiles, welcoming them and asking if they are looking for a bed. He shows off an exquisite model, saying it's very popular among nobility, offering to deliver it straight to the mansion. Aldio calmly adjusts his monocle, asking if they can inspect the quality of that furniture up close. The butler calls for Marie, who immediately pops up holding a massive iron sledgehammer with a bright smile on her face. The merchant panics completely, yelling in utter confusion. As he sees the girl run toward the expensive bed, Marie destroys the bed with a single strike, while Aldio analyzes the debris, commenting that the durability leaves much to be desired. The store owner flies into a rage, face turning red, demanding to know what the two think they're doing. Without losing his calm composure, the experienced butler simply extends a heavy pouch filled with coins directly to the man. Upon opening the bag and seeing the shine of so much gold, all the merchant's anger vanishes instantly, replaced by joy. Aldio calmly asks if it would be possible to repair and deliver the furniture in about 2 days. Eyes gleaming over the gold, the merchant says if they'd like, he can have everything ready today. The clever butler gives a subtle wink, suggesting he wouldn't mind if the repairs took a little longer. Catching the hint, the man winks back, saying it might take about 3 days to finish, much to MC's misfortune. Satisfied with the silent agreement, Aldio smirks, politely asking him to tally up the total cost. As night falls over the Nimrud family's luxurious estate, sinister plans begin to take shape in the shadows. Inside the small palace, an expensive red wine is slowly poured into an elegant crystal glass. A firm hand picks up the bottle from the table, while a tense silence fills the grand hall. Count Dalton Nimrud sits on a luxurious blue couch before a window, holding his glass thoughtfully. The wind howls loudly outside the massive glass windows, heightening the dark atmosphere of that cold night. Dalton apologizes for calling the mercenary during a busy time, but mentions he has an important job for him. The hooded assassin slowly approaches behind the Count's back, merely asking him to provide a name. In a calm, extremely cold voice, the mysterious figure assures he will handle the entire job cleanly. The Count takes a sip of his drink and coldly utters his target's name, young Elric Portman. Outside the grand estate, the wind blows hard as the conspiratorial meeting continues in secret. Dalton gazes at the night with hatred in his eyes, thoughtfully muttering the name of the late Hovan Portman, the hero's father. Minutes later, the assassin asks if there are any special details or cautions he should keep in mind while executing the job. The Count takes another sip of wine, saying to keep everything as discreet as possible, as the plan is nearly ready. The hooded assassin suggests a sudden death far away from home would be the ideal method to avoid suspicion. Dalton wears an evil smile, agreeing that the downfall of an insignificant family like that would be a splendid show. Satisfied with the terms and payment, the mysterious hooded man accepts the mission and prepares to take his leave. Dalton looks at his glass, regretting that he couldn't take Hovan Portman's life with his own hands. However, he assures with a cruel look that he will vent that frustration by eliminating his son. He slams his wine glass onto the table, sealing the tragic fate he plans for the young hero Knight, falls peacefully over the Portman residence, while the couple prepares for an important meal. Sitting side by side at the dinner table, MC and Tyria eat in silence, hearing only the sound of silverware. Tyria calmly chews her food, while the young man glances at her out of the corner of his eye, looking a bit tense about something. The young lady points her fork at his knuckles, curiously asking what happened to his hand. MC gets startled by the sudden question, quickly trying to hide the bruises with an awkward smile. He makes up a clumsy excuse, saying he just scratched himself trying to catch an annoying fly at the tailor shop. Tyria looks at him thoughtfully for a few moments, simply accepting his answer without questioning further. The hero sighs in relief upon realizing she didn't suspect a thing, looking away awkwardly. Later, in the mansion's master bedroom, the massive, comfortable double bed is already neatly made. Seeing that MC's new bed hasn't arrived yet, he panics, realizing he will have to share the space again. Marie lies, saying there was a termite infestation in town and that finding quality furniture is currently impossible. MC smiles awkwardly, asking if it would be a trouble to sleep there for one more night, making the maids celebrate in the background. Quite embarrassed and blushing, Tyria shyly accepts the proposal, saying it's no problem at all. With a tender look, the young man extends his hand to her, gently inviting her to head into the room. Right after, Marie and Rhonda close the couple's bedroom door, walking away down the hallway. Suspicious of her colleague's exaggerated plan, Rhonda stops halfway, giving Marie a stern look. Without wasting time, the housekeeper lands a crisp flick on Marie's head, who winces in pain from the physical scolding. Lying back to back in the dark room, an awkward, heavy silence fills the space between the couple. Suddenly, Tyria decides to break the ice, shyly asking about what Lord Amon said at the tailor shop. MC slowly turns, apologizing to his wife, saying he felt he really needed to tell her that he deeply regrets letting her be tormented by that scoundrel for 10 long years. The hero continues apologizing for making her endure all that pain and suffering alone without his support. With eyes full of sincerity and remorse, the young man repeats how truly sorry he is for everything she went through. Hearing those comforting words, Tyria can't hold back. She covers her face and begins crying with emotion. MC lovingly moves closer, gently pulling his wife in and holding her in a warm embrace to comfort her. While the young lady cries against his chest, he promises that though he cannot change the past, things will be different now. The young man tenderly strokes her hair, assuring her he will never let her face hardships alone again. Tyria clings to him, crying out of pure happiness to finally have her husband truly back by her side. The hero softly asks her to dry her tears while Portman Manor rests beneath the moonlight far away. At a quiet ice cream shop storefront, serves as the hideout for the Moonshadow Assassin Guild branch. Danam, the ruthless leader of the regional branch, calls the attention of all subordinates present. He grandly reveals they received a major new mission directly from Count Dalton Nimrud. One of the members gets confused, questioning why they'd accept another job so close to the main operation. Danam reassures the group, explaining the target is merely a weak noble from the border named Elric Portman. The leader excitedly adds that if they complete the mission, they will make a fortune and be able to retire. The room falls completely silent as the assassins begin weighing the golden opportunity. He flies into a rage, remembering that if Kasha hadn't gotten in their way before, they wouldn't have been demoted to that region. Another assassin laughs contentedly, recalling Kasha's influence doesn't reach here, making everything perfect. The companion beside him smiles in relief, agreeing that things are indeed looking very favorable for the group. Donham asserts that with the mission's success, the kingdom will turn into a battlefield, giving them their chance to shine. The boss grins maliciously, asking if the other two don't also agree with that great opportunity. He slams his fist onto the table, showing he is fully resolved to proceed with the evil plan. Raising his fist enthusiastically, he says they will use the mission to show the leaders of Moonshadow their true value. The black-haired subordinate asks what the exact strategy will be to eliminate the noble MC without fail. Wearing a confident look, the mercenary leader replies he already has a perfect plan in mind. He explains the Portman family opened up positions for stylists, and they will use that opportunity to infiltrate Danum smiles sadistically, assuring that pathetic noble won't even make it alive to the kingdom's banquet. The boss orders everyone to get a good rest, as the infiltration of Portman Manor will begin first thing tomorrow morning. In the quiet of the night, the assassins toast and swear allegiance to the Moonshadow organization once and for all. The day breaks sunny and bright at the Portman residence, bringing a fresh wave of hope to the couple early in the morning. The stylists' elegant dresses sway gently as they approach the mansion's entrance. Butler Aldio receives them at the door with courtesy, thanking them for the long journey and inviting the group inside. Meanwhile, MC walks down the hallway with Rhonda. Complaining without understanding why a man needs to get so dressed up for a banquet, Rhonda sternly reprimands him, reminding him that yesterday's fight put House Portman on bad terms with Count Dalton. She adds that rumors of the hero smashing a man's face like bread dough have already spread across the entire capital. Rhonda sits the young man in a chair, warning him that because of that, all nobles allied with the Count are now their declared enemies. The young man lets out a long sigh, commenting that, to be honest, he also regretted quite a bit what he did to Eamon yesterday. He explains he shouldn't have just beaten him, but rather crushed his head like a watermelon, leaving the housekeeper shocked. Rhonda catches her breath, insisting that if he doesn't dress the part now, the other nobles will look down on him even more. Suddenly, soft knocks echo on the room's door, and the housekeeper realizes the hired stylists have just arrived before opening. Rhonda gives one last stern warning for the hero to behave himself and let the professionals work in peace. She opens the door and welcomes the three women who came to prepare him for the kingdom's grand, important party. MC remains silent, observing the group's entrance, keeping a serious, sharp eye out for any unusual detail. The group's leader, wearing a puffy pink outfit, bows elegantly, saying it is a true honor to meet him. However, upon raising her head and uttering MC's name, she reveals an extremely sadistic look, giving away the assassin's disguise.